The Call of the Eternal Mystery of Ancient Egypt, a deep dive into the inexplicable. Among all the ancient civilizations that have ever existed on Earth, few have such a powerful and enduring magnetism, such a deep aura of unsolved mystery as ancient Egypt. Its monumental structures, pyramids, temples, obelisks, mysterious sphinxes have silently towered over the endless desert sands for thousands of years, serving as majestic and incomprehensible witnesses to an era when, it would seem, the boundaries of human capabilities were erased and ideas about the universe stretched far beyond our modern understanding. Since the first major archaeological research, which began with the Napoleonic expeditions and the deciphering of the Rosetta Stone, the world has learned an incredible amount of facts about the life, beliefs, and culture of the ancient Egyptians. Mummies and sarcophagi, precious artifacts and papyri, temple complexes and necropolises, all this gradually opened the veil of the past before us. And while archaeologists, historians, and Egyptologists work tirelessly to piece together the mosaic of antiquity, each new layer of discovery, each deciphered inscription, and each tomb found only serves to emphasize the paradox. The more we learn, the more questions arise, deepening our conviction that we have barely touched the surface of an authentic, possibly more complex one, and the amazing history of this great civilization. The paradox of ancient Egypt is that a civilization that existed for thousands of years did not know iron in widespread use, mainly using copper and bronze, and presumably did not even have a wheel in its usual understanding for large-scale construction, was able to erect colossal structures. These structures are not just huge, they are astounding in their astronomical alignment accuracy, engineering sophistication, and artistic perfection. How was this possible? What knowledge did their priests possess, whose pervasive influence extended to all spheres of life, from government to medicine and astronomy? What lies behind their hermetic rituals, complex cosmology, and mythology, where gods seemingly descended from the heavens and interacted with humans? Moreover, we encounter intriguing hints about the possible existence of ancient Egyptian technologies that we consider the prerogative of modernity, or even contacts with something outside of our world. These ideas, often dismissed as speculative by academic science, continue to stir minds and find supporters among those who seek alternative explanations for the inexplicable. Could they use electricity, understand aerodynamics, and master stone processing techniques that are superior to our current ones? Were their legends about the gods only myths or veiled memories of real events and creatures that came from outside? This book will be your guide to the world of 30 of the most intriguing and unfathomable secrets of ancient Egypt. We will not limit ourselves to a single point of view, but will look at both generally accepted academic explanations and bold alternative theories, exploring their strengths and weaknesses. We will dive into a world where official explanations often seem insufficient to fully capture the scale and complexity of ancient Egyptian achievements. Each puzzle will be presented in detail so that the reader can appreciate its depth and feel the surprise that it causes. Get ready to rethink everything you knew about the ancient world. From engineering wonders that have no analogs, to hidden knowledge of priests and anomalous artifacts, ancient Egypt continues to beckon us to its sands, where history is intertwined with myth, and rational explanation often gives way to endless wonder and the search for new truths. After all, it is precisely in these unsolved questions that the true, inexhaustible magic of ancient Egypt lies, inviting us to an eternal search for answers. The great buildings and their secrets, a monumental legacy of unfathomable technology. Our journey into the world of unexplained secrets of ancient Egypt inevitably begins with its most recognizable, majestic, and at the same time the most mysterious structures, the pyramids. Their colossal scale, astounding accuracy, and construction methods remain some of the most ambitious and still unsolved engineering puzzles in human history, constantly provoking heated discussions both in the academic community and among supporters of alternative theories. Pyramids of Giza, construction methods. At the center of this mystery, of course, is the Great Pyramid of Cheops, the only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world that has survived to this day. Its construction is estimated to have required moving and laying approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons. However, some blocks, especially in the lower tiers and inside the burial chambers, reach a weight of 15, 20, and even 80 tons, such as the granite ceiling beams of the king's chamber. According to the main archaeological hypothesis, these colossal structures were built over a period of 20-30 years during the Ancient Kingdom period, around 2580, 2560 BC, with the help of a huge labor force, tens of thousands of people using simple tools, levers, wooden sleds, and various types of ramps, straight, spiral, or combined. However, despite the apparent logic of this theory, it faces a number of serious problems and criticisms. First, the logistical challenges of such a large-scale operation seem almost insurmountable. If the pyramid was built in 20 years, this means that every day, without interruption, it was necessary to install about 800 blocks, that is, one block every 2 to 3 minutes. The construction and maintenance of giant ramps for this speed of movement, which require a huge amount of wood, which was not enough in Egypt, and constant maintenance in itself seems to be a colossal task, comparable in scope to the pyramid itself. In addition, the interior chambers, shafts, and galleries of the pyramids, such as the Grand Gallery of the Great Pyramid, exhibit complex architectural solutions, perfect geometry, and amazing ventilation that are difficult to explain with simple methods. For example, accurately aligning the central shafts to certain stars required knowledge beyond simple construction. Alternative theories, on the contrary, suggest the use of much more advanced but lost technologies. Some researchers talk about the possibility of using unknown methods of levitation or anti-gravity, sound vibrations, as we will see later, or even the shape of concrete that could be cast on site from ground limestone, the theory of Joseph Davidowitz. Others cite external influences, suggesting the help of highly advanced civilizations, possibly extraterrestrial, that passed on their knowledge to the Egyptians. Although these theories have no direct evidence in the form of artifacts or texts, they attempt to explain the striking accuracy and scale that seems to go beyond the capabilities of the Bronze Age. The question of how the Egyptians, without heavy equipment and even without a wheel, in its modern sense for large-capacity transportation, were able to carry out such an ambitious and precise project still has no clear answer, leaving the Great Pyramid an eternal symbol of the engineering riddle. Precision stone processing. Even more striking than the sheer scale of construction is the unimaginable precision with which the ancient Egyptians processed hard rock such as granite, diorite, basalt, and quartzite. These rocks are extremely difficult to cut and polish, even with modern tools. Inside pyramids, for example in the chamber of the King of the Great Pyramid, in temples, Osirian in Abydos, granite temples of Giza, and when creating sarcophagi, you can find blocks with perfectly flat surfaces that seem to be polished to a mirror shine, precise right angles, 90 degrees with a deviation of a fraction of a millimeter, and unprecedented fit. The seams between these multi-ton blocks are so tight that even a razor blade or a piece of paper cannot be pushed between them. The traditional explanation suggests that the Egyptians used copper or bronze tools, chisels, saws, in combination with abrasives such as quartz sand. However, experiments show that copper and bronze are too soft for effective granite processing, and sand, although abrasive, is not able to provide such unprecedented accuracy and smoothness of the surface over large areas. Modern master stone carvers recognize that repeating such work by hand, even with modern technology and diamond tools, would have required an enormous amount of time, resources, and incredible skill, making mass production of such elements virtually impossible in ancient times. Researchers who support alternative versions point to microscopic analysis of surfaces, which reveals traces that are not typical for manual processing. Some suggest using high-speed drills that work with incredible force, or even ultrasonic technologies that can soften the stone or create perfectly smooth cuts. Others see it as proof that the Egyptians have advanced knowledge in material science or use technologies derived from more advanced civilizations. Regardless of how they did it, this phenomenon challenges our understanding of their level of technological development and suggests that there are lost methods of processing materials that we have not yet been able to reproduce. Obelisks, mining and transportation. Carving huge obelisks from a single block of granite, some of which reached more than 40 meters in height and weighed more than 1,000 tons, such as the unfinished obelisk in Aswan, polishing them to a mirror-like shine, and then transporting them hundreds of kilometers to the installation sites is a separate, equally complex and mysterious problem. An unfinished obelisk in the Aswan quarry, left behind by a crack in the process, provides some insight into mining methods. Workers probably use stone balls to chisel furrows around the monolith. However, this is only the beginning of the process. The most difficult part is transporting these giant monoliths overland to the Nile, then over water, probably on purpose-built barges, and finally mounting them vertically on pedestals. Modern engineers and logisticians recognize that moving and lifting such masses is a colossal task, even with modern hydraulic cranes and sophisticated machinery. For example, attempts to reproduce the lifting of the obelisk in experimental conditions using well-known ancient Egyptian technologies often turn out to be either unrealistic due to the scale of the necessary resources or simply do not give the required result. How did the Egyptians raise these monuments? Set them on pedestals with amazing precision and ensure their stability. Ancient images show scenes of the Colossus being transported by sledge with the help of thousands of workers, but they do not give any hints of the technology of lifting and installing obelisks. The lack of clear instructions, detailed drawings, or detailed descriptions of these processes in ancient texts only adds to the mystery. They may have used complex systems of levers, counterweights, sand mounds, or even techniques that we haven't yet discovered or can't imagine, which allowed them to overcome gravity with surprising ease. This mystery highlights that the Egyptians possessed engineering knowledge that goes beyond our current understanding. Impossible designs and technologies. The deep secrets of ancient engineers. As we continue our exploration of the building wonders of ancient Egypt, we encounter even more mysterious structures and techniques that seem to exceed our understanding of the capabilities of ancient civilizations, suggesting lost knowledge or even completely different construction methods. Sarcophagi of the Serapeum. The underground necropolis of the Serapeum in Saqqara, discovered by French archaeologist Auguste Mariette in the mid-19th century, houses one of the most striking and least explicable collections of ancient Egyptian artifacts. There are 24 massive, perfectly polished granite sarcophagi, each weighing from 60 to 100 tons, and their lids made of the same material reach a weight of 20 tons. Carved from solid blocks of hard Aswan granite, these monoliths display incredible precision on the interior and exterior surfaces, as well as perfect right angles, as if they were made with high-precision industrial equipment capable of processing stone with micron precision. Microscopic analysis of surfaces reveals traces of tools that are supposed to have rotated at great speed and exerted tremendous pressure, creating exceptionally smooth and even surfaces that are impossible to obtain with hand tools and abrasives. The main mystery lies not only in their manufacture, but also in how these multi-ton blocks were moved through narrow underground corridors and installed in their niches, which themselves are cut out of the rock with amazing accuracy. Some passages to the niches are so narrow that they leave virtually no room for manipulating such massive objects. Their purpose also remains controversial. Although they are traditionally believed to have served as burial chambers for the sacred bulls of Apis, incarnations of the god Ptah, no bull mummies or other organic remains have been found in any of the sarcophagi. This leads proponents of alternative theories to assume a different, possibly technological, energy, or even astronomical purpose of these giant containers. Some researchers suggest that they could be part of some ancient power plant or serve to store something that has not survived to this day. Be that as it may, the Serapeum remains a stunning testament to engineering capabilities that we cannot explain within the conventional understanding of ancient Egyptian technology. Megalithic blocks and their technology. In addition to the already mentioned pyramids, there are other megalithic structures in Egypt whose colossal blocks cause similar confusion. One striking example is the Osirian at Abydos, a mysterious underground structure built from giant granite and quartzite blocks, some of which weigh more than 100 tons. These blocks are fitted together with incredible precision, creating a monolithic, incredibly strong structure. Unlike most Egyptian temples, Osirion has a very severe and monumental appearance, devoid of the usual hieroglyphs and reliefs, which suggests its more ancient origin or other non-religious purpose. The technology that makes it possible to lift, transport, and perfectly fit such massive stones without using modern mechanisms is one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. How could the Egyptians have operated on such boulders without the use of powerful cranes or sophisticated machinery? Some researchers suggest that the Egyptians may have had methods to soften the stone, for example, using chemical solutions or high-frequency vibrations, which would have allowed them to work with such huge masses with greater ease, shape them, and then harden them again. Other theories talk about the possible use of acoustic levitation or anti-gravity devices, which of course is a radical hypothesis, but tries to explain the apparent impossible achievements. The lack of detailed explanations in Egyptian texts and images showing these complex processes only adds to the mystery, suggesting the presence of lost knowledge in physics and engineering. Polygonal masonry. Although polygonal masonry, in which irregular stones fit perfectly together without the use of mortar, is best known from South American Inca buildings, as in Machu Picchu or Cusco, its elements are also found in ancient Egypt, which is a less well-known but no less intriguing mystery. Examples of such masonry can be found in some parts of the same Osirian in Abydos, as well as in some elements of the temple complex in Karnak. This construction method creates incredibly strong and earthquake-resistant structures that have withstood thousands of years of earthquakes and natural disasters, demonstrating phenomenal stability. The question is, how did the ancient Egyptians achieve such a perfect, laser-cut fit of multi-ton blocks with many faces in convex, concave shapes without visible gaps? This requires not only exceptional accuracy of measurement and calculation, but also the ability to move and manipulate stones with amazing ease, as well as bring them to perfect condition. Traditional explanations involving the long and painstaking selection and adjustment of stones by hand seem insufficient to explain such a grand scale and precision. Proponents of alternative theories suggest that the Egyptians may have used some method of molding the stone, allowing it to soften and then give it the desired shape, or a complex geometric and computational system that was lost over time. Perhaps this type of masonry indicates common roots with other ancient megalithic cultures around the world, hinting at the existence of a global prehistoric civilization or the transmission of knowledge through a single source. Light puzzles and artifacts from ancient lamps to flying models. In addition to the amazing construction achievements and inexplicable stone processing, ancient Egypt leaves us with mysteries related to potentially lost technologies that relate to light, electricity, and even aerodynamics. These anomalous artifacts and images challenge our understanding of the technological possibilities of that era. One of the most intriguing theories concerns ancient batteries and the possible use of electricity centered on the so-called Dendera light pole. Bas-reliefs in the underground crypts, hidden rooms, of the Temple of Hathor in Dendera, built in the Greco-Roman period, depict scenes that many researchers, especially from alternative archaeology, interpret as huge incandescent lamps or other electrical devices. These images show large, oblong objects that resemble the flasks of modern lamps, inside which a snake is writhing, a symbol of divine energy or life force. The lower end of the lamp is connected to some kind of apparatus that resembles an electric generator or power source, and the figures of the priests seem to manipulate these devices. The absence of soot from torches on the ceilings and walls of the deep underground corridors where these bas-reliefs were found, torches inevitably leave soot, only strengthens this theory, suggesting that lighting was carried out without an open fire. Although official Egyptology explains these images as mythological representations of a serpent being born from a lotus flower, symbolizing creation and rebirth, proponents of the ancient technology theory point out the striking similarity to modern electrical devices and suggest that this may not be a symbolic, but a literal representation of real technology. Similar finds, such as the Baghdad Battery, although related to the Parthian culture of Mesopotamia, support the idea that ancient civilizations may have possessed a forgotten knowledge of electricity. If this is the case, it completely changes our understanding of their technological level and lighting methods in ancient times. Another highly controversial visual puzzle is the Abydos hieroglyphs found in the Temple of Seti-Mern in Abydos. On one of the door lintels in this temple, built during the New Kingdom period, carved images were found that strikingly, even frighteningly, resemble modern military equipment, a helicopter, a submarine, or a tank, and even a certain aircraft that looks like a jet plane or glider. These hieroglyphs have become one of the most popular and frequently cited arguments in favor of the theory of paleocontact or the existence of a highly developed prehistoric civilization. The main explanation of this phenomenon in the academic environment is the palimpsest effect, applying multiple layers of hieroglyphs on top of each other over the centuries. As the plaster and later inscriptions fell away, parts of the earlier hieroglyphs were exposed, creating a random overlay of symbols that, when viewed from a certain angle and interpreted, look like familiar objects. For example, helicopter could be the result of overlapping the symbols hand and eye. However, despite this explanation, the striking and unique similarity to Egyptian art continues to fuel theories about contacts with highly advanced civilizations, perhaps from the future, time travelers or extraterrestrial beings that may have left their traces in the form of such images, or about ancient civilizations that possess similar technologies, whose knowledge was limited to the use of the internet. Lost. Whether it's an optical illusion or something more, the visual similarity remains deeply intriguing and raises questions. The mystery of the bird from Saqqara also fits into the context of possible ancient technologies and understanding of aerodynamics. This small wooden artifact, about 18 centimeters long and weighing about 39 grams, was found in 1898 in the tomb of Polygonal in Saqqara, dating from about 200 BC, Ptolemaic period. At first glance, it looks like a stylized bird figurine. However, on closer inspection, its shape seems unusual. Its wings are not positioned like most birds, but rather resemble the wings of modern aircraft, having a slight bend characteristic of the wing profile that provides lift, the so-called diagonal or reverse bend. The tail of the object is also made in the form of a vertical stabilizer, similar to the tail of aircraft, and not a flat or fan-shaped bird tail. Official archaeology traditionally interprets this artifact as a stylized bird, a children's toy, a yardstick, or a weather vane. However, some enthusiasts and aircraft designers, such as Dr. Khalil Masiha, have experimented with copies of it and argued that if enlarged to real dimensions and equipped with an engine, this object could fly, having certain aerodynamic properties characteristic of a glider. They point out that the shape of the wings and tail is not random and demonstrates the principles of aerodynamics, suggesting that the ancient Egyptians may have had an understanding of aerodynamics or even the principles of flight. This small bird becomes a symbol of questions about the hidden knowledge of the Egyptians in a field that we believe was developed only in modern times and continues to inspire alternative research. Unusual artifacts and images, evidence of the unknown and forgotten. Continuing the theme of unusual finds, ancient Egypt left behind many objects and images that continue to baffle researchers, offering alternative views on their history and possible origin. These artifacts, whether sculptures or detailed maps, point to knowledge and perceptions of the world that go beyond traditional academic understanding and force us to rethink established chronologies. Strange figurines and figurines are periodically found among the usual funeral paraphernalia or in the ruins of temples. Unlike the canonical images of pharaohs, gods, and common people, these artifacts sometimes depict creatures with features that differ significantly from the usual ones. These can include figures with disproportionately large or highly elongated skulls, such as some of the Amarna figurines, although this is often explained by the artistic stylization characteristic of the Akhenaten period. Huge almond-shaped eyes, disproportionate bodies, or strange inhuman facial features that do not correspond to either known animals or standard ones. Images of Egyptian gods or people. Some of these figures can be interpreted as images of developmental abnormalities or caricatures. However, other specimens are so specific and unusual that they give rise to speculation about possible contact with unknown humanoid species, such as gray, aliens from modern ufology, or even extraterrestrial beings whose physical forms could be captured in Egyptian art. Proponents of the paleo-contact theory, they are often seen as direct evidence that the gods of ancient Egypt were actually representatives of other civilizations that left their mark on the culture, art, and even, perhaps, in the genetics of the ancient Egyptians. This interpretation, while considered marginal, raises fundamental questions about the limits of our historical knowledge and the possibility of life forms that may have visited Earth in ancient times. Another technological conundrum that points to a high level of craftsmanship is glass artifacts. The ancient Egyptians were known for their skills in working with glass from the early dynastic periods, creating beautiful beads, amulets, small vessels for incense and oils, as well as decorative elements for furniture and jewelry. However, the quality and purity of some of the glass samples found during the excavations, as well as their composition, raise questions about how they achieved such mastery without the use of modern technology. The production of clear, high-quality glass, free of impurities and air bubbles, requires very high temperatures, on the order of 1500–1700 degrees, depending on the composition, and precise control over the melting, cooling, and forming process, which is believed to have become widely available only with the development of later industrial technologies, for example in the Roman era or even much later. There are also controversial findings that some researchers interpret as lenses, although their function as optical devices remains unproven and controversial. If the Egyptians were indeed able to produce glass of this quality and possibly even shape it into lenses, for example to improve vision or for use in astronomy, this hints at a much deeper knowledge of chemistry, metallurgy, and optics that may have been lost or passed on to a small circle of dedicated craftsmen. This raises the question of how developed their chemical industry and metallurgy were. Finally, the amazing accuracy and depth of the starry sky maps and astronomical objects on the ceilings of tombs and temples, such as the famous Dendrian zodiac from the Temple of Hathor, continues to amaze the imagination and serve as a source of scientific and alternative hypotheses. These maps are not just decorations or simple images of stars. They are complex astronomical diagrams that demonstrate detailed knowledge of constellations, many of which correspond to our modern ones, planets, their orbits, movements, and even astronomical phenomena, such as eclipses and the positions of constellations at specific time periods. Dendrian the zodiac, for example, is a complete celestial atlas that includes the positions of stars and planets at a particular point in time, which, according to some calculations, refers to very early dates, which cast doubt on its official dating to the Greco-Roman period. The question is how the Egyptians could have obtained such accurate and long-term astronomical data without the use of modern telescopes, precise chronometers, and sophisticated mathematical calculation tools that we believe were not available to them. Was this knowledge the result of thousands of years of continuous observation, passed down from generation to generation and requiring incredible patience and consistency? Or was this information inherited from an older, perhaps global civilization that had more advanced methods of observing celestial bodies and recording their results? This indicates a much deeper understanding of the cosmos, its laws and influences on Earth's processes than is commonly believed for ancient cultures, and opens the door to discussing the sources of their phenomenal astronomical wisdom. Sound, symbols, and ancient pyramid lore. Invisible dimensions of Egyptian wisdom. The ancient Egyptians, as we have seen, had an amazing knowledge of astronomy and engineering, but their understanding of the world also extended to subtle, intangible spheres. Sound, a complex system of symbols, and ancient traditions about the origin of the world played a much larger role in their culture than we can imagine, hinting at a deep understanding of the laws of the universe that may have been lost. Inexplicable musical instruments, or sound devices, are often mentioned in the context of their rituals and even construction, suggesting the Egyptians' deep understanding of acoustics, resonance, and vibrations. In addition to the musical instruments known to us, such as sistrums, rattles, flutes, harps, and lyres, some researchers believe that the Egyptians had knowledge of how to use sound for more practical or metaphysical purposes. The most striking and mysterious example is the singing colossi of Memnon, two giant statues of Pharaoh Amenhotep III, located on the west bank of the Nile in Luxor. Ancient Greeks and Romans who visited these sites left numerous written records that these statues made a singing, humming, or crying sound at dawn, especially after a strong earthquake in 27 BC that damaged one of them. This sound was so well known that tourists specially came to hear it, and the inscriptions on the statues confirm their acoustic properties. Although most academic explanations are limited to natural causes, such as the thermal expansion of the stone when the temperature changes from night cold to morning heat, or the passage of wind through cracks in a damaged statue, this phenomenon indicates unique acoustic properties of the material or even the deliberate use of resonance in monumental structures. Bolder alternative theories suggest that the Egyptians may have used sound vibrations not only for music or rituals, but also during the construction process, perhaps to facilitate the movement of heavy blocks, their precise fitting, or even to work the stone. Some modern experiments with resonance show how sound can affect materials, which gives rise to such hypotheses. Perhaps the Egyptians had an empirical knowledge of the laws of acoustics that allowed them to use sound to heal, influence consciousness, or even connect with the subtle planes of existence, which takes their understanding of sound far beyond simple music. Strange images on tombs, especially those that appear to depict non-human beings or scenes that resemble modern technology or objects, continue to be a source of speculation and inspire theories about ancient contacts. In Egyptian art, although it was strictly canonical, sometimes there are anomalous images that are difficult to explain within the framework of traditional iconography. These may be figures with disproportionately large or highly elongated skulls, although some may be associated with dynastic features or artistic stylization, as in the Amarna period large, almond-shaped eyes, out-of-proportion bodies, or strange, inhumane facial features that don't match either known animals or standard depictions of Egyptian gods or humans. Some of these figures can be interpreted as images of developmental abnormalities, rare diseases, or even cartoons. However, other specimens are so specific and unusual that they give rise to speculation about possible contact with unknown humanoid species, such as gray aliens from modern ufology, or even extraterrestrial beings whose physical forms could be captured in the art of ancient Egypt. Proponents of the paleocontact theory often see them as direct evidence that the gods of ancient Egypt were actually representatives of other, highly developed civilizations that could have visited the Earth in ancient times, leaving their mark on the culture, art, technology, and even, possibly, in the genetics of the ancient Egyptians. Other images that are interpreted as spaceships, flying saucers, or other apparatuses also add fuel to the mystery, raising questions. Were these visions the product of fantasy, the result of deep spiritual experiences, or a literal representation of something they actually saw? Whether it is a symbolic representation, an allegory, or a literal representation of a real phenomenon, these anomalous drawings make us think about the limits of human imagination and the reality that the Egyptians knew. Finally, the secret codes and symbols in hieroglyphs indicate a multi-layered system of knowledge accessible only to initiates, which makes the Egyptian script not just a language, but the key to the deepest secrets. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic writing was not just a means of recording information, but a complex sacred language of images, each of which could carry several interrelated meanings: literal, phonetic, symbolic, metaphorical, and even deeply esoteric or mathematical. This layering allowed priests and scribes to encode the most complex philosophical, religious, cosmological, and possibly scientific knowledge in such a way that the average person perceived only a superficial, religious, or historical message, while an initiate with the keys to interpretation could read the hidden meanings and secret teachings. For example, certain combinations of hieroglyphs could mean not only words or phrases, but also cosmic principles, mathematical formulas, astronomical propositions, or even instructions for performing complex rituals and technological processes. Such a system of hermetic writing ensured the safety of intimate knowledge, passing it on only to those who were ready to perceive and understand it. It is believed that many of the true knowledge of Egypt concerning the structure of the universe, subtle energies, alchemy, astrology, and metaphysical aspects of being were deliberately hidden in this symbolic form. This knowledge was passed on orally or through closed schools of initiation, waiting for those who could unravel their complex, layered codes. Deciphering these hidden levels of meaning can lead to revolutionary discoveries about the Egyptians, true understanding of physical laws and spiritual reality, secret societies and their unknown knowledge, the veil of secrecy of the ancient elite. Behind the facade of majestic temples, monumental pyramids, and open rituals, ancient Egypt hid a complex and comprehensive system of knowledge and power, concentrated in the hands of a select few. These closed groups, or secret societies, played a key role in shaping and governing Egyptian civilization, possessing information that was inaccessible to mere mortals and even most officials. Secret societies of priests were not just religious figures. They were the intellectual, spiritual, and political elite, the custodians and developers of vast knowledge in a wide variety of fields. Their competencies range from astronomy, used to accurately determine the timing of Nile floods in agricultural cycles, and mathematics necessary for grand construction, to medicine, architecture, engineering, metallurgy, and a deep knowledge of psychology and human nature. The priesthood was not monolithic. It consisted of various cults dedicated to specific deities, for example, the priests of Amun, Ra, Ta, Osiris, and each of these cults had its own strict hierarchy and specific, often esoteric knowledge that was passed down from generation to generation. This knowledge was mostly oral and passed down through strict rites of passage, which ensured its exclusivity and strengthened the power of the priestly caste. Most of this information was inaccessible to the common people, and sometimes even to the pharaohs, which allowed the priests to maintain their authority, acting as the only intermediaries between the gods and people, as well as control the most important areas of state life, from education and legislation to medicine and even foreign policy. Perhaps these societies were the true engines of Egypt's technological and cultural progress, hiding their methods and discoveries from prying eyes in order to maintain their monopoly on knowledge. They could possess not only theoretical, but also practical skills that allow them to create technologies that seem anachronistic. Within this closed hierarchy of the priesthood, the mystery of the secret society of the Nine occupies a special place. Although there is no direct and indisputable archaeological evidence for the existence of such a particular society or group of 9 high initiates, the concept is closely related to the Ennead, Greek Ennead. 9, a group of 9 supreme gods of Heliopolis, Atum, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, Osiris, Isis, Set, Nephthys, who were key figures in the Egyptian cosmogony and creation mythology. This may be a metaphor, but it is also an allusion to some secret brotherhood or supreme council of 9 of the most powerful and dedicated priests or sages who possessed the highest, most intimate knowledge and could secretly control the spiritual and even political life of Egypt, acting from the shadows. Their complete secrecy would explain the lack of direct references in official records that were intended for public consumption. Their influence could manifest itself in elaborate symbolism, hidden messages in art and architecture, as well as in the direction of major state decisions, including the construction of monumental complexes. Perhaps this society was the top of the priestly hierarchy, where the deepest secrets were kept, including those related to lost technologies, the true history of mankind, or even the nature of the cosmos and interaction with other forms of existence. Hypotheses about such a secret society of the 9 are often found in esoteric literature, suggesting that they were the true guardians of ancient wisdom. Finally, the role of magicians and sorcerers in ancient Egyptian society was not only legitimate, but also highly respected, closely linked to religious and medical practices. Ancient Egyptian magic, known as Ka, was not perceived as something dark, primitive, or deceptive, but as a universal creative force inherent in the universe. It was a power possessed by the gods, especially Ra, and could be expertly controlled by trained priests and specialists who were able to interact with this energy. These magicians were experts at understanding and manipulating these powers for a variety of purposes: protecting against evil spirits, healing diseases, many medical papyri contain magic, spells along with medical prescriptions, divination, influencing weather events, or even influencing people's thoughts and actions. Extant magical papyri, such as the London and Leiden magic papyri, contain complex spells, recipes for amulets, talismans, and detailed rituals that indicate that it was not just a collection of superstitions, but perhaps an empirically developed system of knowledge about natural phenomena, human psychology, and possibly interaction with invisible energies or measurements. Egyptian magic was based on a deep knowledge of the names of gods, formulas, symbols, and rituals that were believed to have the power to change reality. Many of these techniques and their true meaning still remain a mystery to the modern world, suggesting that there is lost knowledge about the impact on reality and the ability of priests to influence events through methods that we cannot reproduce or even explain scientifically today. Their practice was part of a complex system that spanned the physical and spiritual worlds, esoteric teachings, and unfathomable purpose. The hidden dimensions of being. The deep knowledge of ancient Egypt extended far beyond the material world and engineering achievements, covering the most complex concepts about the soul, posthumous existence, and the true purpose of man, and structures that we still cannot fully understand, revealing the veil over their amazing worldview. Esoteric knowledge of the soul and the afterlife formed the central and perhaps most complex core of the Egyptian worldview, far surpassing the simple concepts of life after death common in other ancient cultures. For the Egyptians, the soul was not a single, indivisible whole, but a complex conglomeration of interrelated but separate components, each of which played its own unique role both in the earthly life and in the vast and dangerous posthumous journey. Among these components were Kai, a life force or doppelganger that could inhabit the tomb and feed on offerings; Bia, a person, a free-flying bird with the head of a person, able to move between worlds and return to the body; A, a transformed spirit that achieved bliss and light in the afterlife, united with the gods; as well as Ren, the name that had to be preserved for the soul to exist; Jester, the shadow associated with Kai; and Ib, the heart, the seat of reason, emotion, and conscience that was weighed in the judgment of Osiris. Detailed descriptions of the complex journey of these parts of the soul through the Duatan afterlife, inhabited by both friendly deities and fearsome demons and monsters, were contained in such monumental texts as the Book of the Dead, more correctly, Chapters of Going Out in a Day, and Amduat, What's in the Underworld. These texts served not just as religious treatises, but as elaborate guidebooks containing spells, passwords, descriptions of deities to be worshipped, and challenges to pass through in order to achieve well-being in the afterlife. The detail of these teachings, their complex symbolism, the sequence of rituals, and the need to possess this knowledge to successfully pass the afterlife is amazing. This suggests that there is either an extremely advanced metaphysical system based on deep philosophical and possibly empirical observations of the nature of consciousness and death, or, according to some, even real knowledge of posthumous existence, which was available only to a few initiated priests. Perhaps these texts were not just mythology or a collection of superstitions, but encrypted instructions for a spiritual journey that requires deep training, understanding, and the ability to experience transcendence. Inextricably linked to this knowledge were the true meaning of initiation rituals. Initiation into the mysteries of Egyptian religion, philosophy, and science was a multi-step, rigorous, and often dangerous process available only to select priests and members of the highest elite. These rituals probably included not only the transmission of oral and written knowledge about cosmogony, ethics, metaphysics, and the laws of nature, but also intense psychological testing, meditation practices, mind control techniques, self-improvement techniques, and perhaps even ways to work with subtle energies or interact with other dimensions of reality. It is believed that it was in these rituals that neophytes went through symbolic death and rebirth, gaining access to higher levels of consciousness and perception. The places where such rituals are performed, hidden chambers in the depths of temples, such as the temple at Abydos or the dungeons of Dendera. Secret underground labyrinths, such as the supposed labyrinth in Fayum, which Herodotus wrote about, or even the inner, inaccessible rooms of the pyramids, only increase their mystery and hint at a special, sacred, and perhaps the energy purpose of these spaces. The secrecy surrounding these rites has led to the loss of many of their details and true meanings for the modern world. But it is from Egyptian initiations that many later esoteric traditions and mystical brotherhoods, such as the Rosicrucians, Freemasons, are believed to have originated, suggesting that Egyptian initiations were a source of deep transformational experience and held the keys to the future. Understanding of universal occult laws. Finally, we are confronted with the inexplicable purposes of some structures that, it would seem, were not intended for burials, despite their monumentality, complexity, and thorough execution. In addition to the obvious tombs for pharaohs and temple complexes for worshiping the gods, there are structures in Egypt whose purpose remains one of the biggest mysteries, challenging traditional archaeological explanations. For example, some perfectly crafted underground chambers found in various locations, other than the Serapeum, or objects and internal structures in the pyramids that do not contain any traces of burial sites or cult use in the traditional sense raise questions. A classic example is the mysterious niches and shafts inside the Great Pyramid, which have no explicit functional explanation within funerary or temple architecture. What were the so-called ventilation shafts of the Great Pyramid used for example, which lead to walled-up walls and, as research with the help of robots shows, end with a certain door or barrier that hides something behind it? Alternative theories suggest that these structures may have served some technological purpose. For example, to be part of complex power plants, such as power generators or resonators, that use the Earth's geophysical forces or even cosmic radiation. Or they could be used to conduct unknown experiments related to physics, sound, or consciousness. It is also hypothesized that these non-burial structures may have been observatories for observing celestial phenomena that we do not understand, or even centers for communication with other dimensions or life forms. Perhaps some of them were repositories for unique artifacts or texts that have not yet been found. These mysteries force us to reconsider the traditional ideas about the ancient Egyptian civilization and admit that it had much more complex technological and spiritual capabilities than is commonly believed, and many of its structures had a multi-layered, not obvious to us purpose. Curses, energies, and oracles. The fine line between mysticism and science. Ancient Egypt is not only a world of majestic structures and deep esoteric knowledge, but also a world of unexplained phenomena that teeter on the edge of mysticism, psychology, and perhaps unknown scientific principles, continuing to influence our perception of this ancient, mysterious land and its not fully solved secrets. One of the most famous but also sinister mysteries is the curses of the pharaohs and the unexplained deaths associated with the opening of ancient tombs. The most famous and widely discussed case is the tragic chain of events that unfolded after the discovery of the intact tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun by Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon in the Valley of the Kings in November 1922. Shortly after the tomb was opened, several members of the expedition, including the financial backer Lord Carnarvon, who died of blood poisoning after being bitten by a mosquito, died under mysterious circumstances, often from fleeting and unexplained illnesses. The victims included Carter's secretary, the radiologist who x-rayed the mummy, and others directly or indirectly connected to the discovery. This series of deaths gave rise to a persistent myth about the curse of the pharaohs, designed to protect the eternal rest of the deceased and punish those who dared to violate it. Although skeptics offer rational explanations, such as ancient molds, bacteria, fungi, for example, Aspergillus niger, toxic spores or gases contained in tombs closed for thousands of years, as well as psychological effects or ordinary coincidences. Many of the expedition participants were elderly or suffered from pre-existing diseases. The myth of the curse remains alive and continues to nurture popular culture. The question is, was it just a game of the subconscious mind and circumstances, reinforced by the press and superstitious beliefs? Or did the ancient priests really have knowledge about the methods of biological, chemical, or even psychological protection of their tombs, which we still do not know? Perhaps the curses were not just words, but part of a complex ritual designed to have a real impact on violators. Some researchers also talk about the existence of energy fields and their effects in ancient Egypt, suggesting that the Egyptians had lost knowledge about geoenergy and the ability to use it in their buildings. Proponents of this theory argue that certain structures, primarily pyramids and temples, were built in places with special energy of the earth, the so-called ley lines or energy nodes, which are supposedly lines of geomagnetic energy, or in themselves were powerful resonators and generators of some invisible forces. These pyramid energies are supposed to have a variety of effects, influence people, promoting healing, well-being, or altering consciousness. Organic matter, slowing down food decomposition, sharpening razor blades, and even physical processes, such as plant growth or crystallization. Although scientific experiments to reproduce such effects often produce mixed results, are difficult to verify, or are not supported by academic science due to the lack of rigorous methodologies, numerous personal evidence, and hypotheses that the pyramid shape itself is a powerful energy concentrator continue to support this intriguing theory. Perhaps the ancient Egyptians had empirical knowledge about the interaction with these energies, which we are not yet able to measure or understand with our modern instruments. This raises the question that the architecture of the Egyptians may have been not only functional, but also energetically active, serving purposes that we are only beginning to realize. Finally, the talking statues and oracles present a puzzle that balances between deep religious belief, complex mechanics, and potentially advanced but lost illusion techniques or even paranormal phenomena. In the temples of ancient Egypt, rituals were often held during which statues of deities uttered predictions, gave answers to pilgrims' questions, or even pointed out future events, making important state decisions. For example, the oracle of the god Amun in Karnak, or the famous singing colossi of Memnon. For the ancient Egyptians, this was a direct, incomprehensible communication with the divine world. Modern researchers are inclined to explain these phenomena by priestly manipulation. The use of hidden passages and acoustic chambers inside or behind the statues, through which the priest could speak, creating the illusion of the deity's voice. The use of complex hydraulic or pneumatic systems that could move the statues or make sounds. Or even the use of steam mechanisms to create the effect breaths or voices. However, this does not detract from their skill in creating such impressive illusions, which required a deep knowledge of engineering, acoustics, and possibly crowd psychology. More ambitious theories suggest that the Egyptians had other, more subtle methods of influencing human perception, for example, through special incense, psychotropic plants, hypnosis, or specific ritual states, or even natural phenomena to convince believers of divine intervention. Perhaps the oracles were not just tricks, but the result of a deep understanding of psychology and the ability to manipulate human consciousness to achieve certain goals, or even a method of transmission information from secret societies. The true mechanism of these talking statues is still not fully understood, leaving room for much speculation and research. Unexplained events in hidden territories, voices of ancient lore and undiscovered dungeons. Ancient Egypt never ceases to amaze not only with its grandiose, visible creations, but also with stories about events that go beyond the ordinary, as well as about hidden, perhaps still undiscovered places that can hold the key to its greatest secrets, completely changing our understanding of its true antiquity and origin. One of the most radical mysteries challenging established chronology and academic dating is the origin of the Great Pyramids, according to ancient lore. While modern archaeology and Egyptology strongly link the construction of the Great Pyramids at Giza with the pharaohs of the 4th dynasty, Cheops, Chephren, and Mycerinus, and date them to approximately 2580-2560 BC, many ancient texts, Arabic chronicles, folk legends of Egypt itself, as well as later Coptic and Muslim sources, claim that these colossal structures were built long before the dynastic pharaohs. Some legends even refer their construction to the period before the Great Flood, hinting at a connection with the vanished antediluvian civilization. For example, the Arab historian al-Masudi, in X century AD, wrote in his Book of Golden Meadows that the pyramids were built by King Saurid, long before the flood to preserve knowledge and treasures from the coming catastrophe. Other sources attribute their creation either to the gods who descended to earth or to some powerful ancient sages, such as the legendary Hermes Trismegistus, who is considered the Egyptian god Thoth, the patron saint of knowledge and writing, who possessed superhuman knowledge and technology inaccessible to ordinary people. These stories mention the use of magic, sound vibrations to move giant blocks, which echoes modern speculation about acoustic levitation, or unknown mechanisms to overcome gravity. If these traditions are even partially true, this radically changes the time frame for the existence of highly developed civilizations on Earth and casts doubt on many of the postulates of modern archaeology, suggesting that we have missed entire millennia of history and that humanity or some other intelligent beings possessed incomparably more advanced technologies in the much more distant past. This also raises the question that the Egyptian civilization may not have been the beginning, but only an heir or even a degraded version of a previous, more advanced culture. Another fascinating and constantly exciting mystery is hidden chambers and passageway that may still remain undetected inside or under already famous monumental structures. Despite decades of intensive archaeological research, the use of ground-penetrating radars, thermal imagers, and other advanced technologies, new evidence is constantly emerging, indicating the presence of previously unknown cavities. The most striking and recent example is the discovery of the Big Void. At the Great Pyramid of Cheops in 2017, the researchers used muon tomography, a method based on detecting muons, high-energy cosmic ray particles that can penetrate dense materials. This cavity, about 30 meters long and several meters high, is located above the Grand Gallery. Although its exact purpose is still unclear, it may be a construction unloading chamber, like the others above the King's Chamber, or something else. The very fact of its existence, as well as the discovery of many other small anomalies in density, proves that even the most studied objects, such as the Great Pyramid, can keep secrets that haven't been revealed yet. Particularly intriguing are theories about the Hall of Records, or secret libraries supposedly hidden under the paws of the Sphinx, or in other as-yet unexplored parts of the Giza complex. Edgar Cayce, an American clairvoyant, predicted the existence of such a hall containing the history and knowledge of an ancient, highly developed civilization. Proponents of this theory believe that these hidden rooms can store scrolls, artifacts, maps of the starry sky, historical records and technological drawings that can reveal the true history, lost knowledge and technology of the ancient Egyptians, or even more ancient civilizations that preceded them. Perhaps these chambers were deliberately hidden to preserve invaluable knowledge for future generations, or to protect them from destruction in times of cataclysms. Finally, hypotheses about underground cities and vast tunnels add another level of mystery to the Egyptian mysteries, suggesting the existence of entire hidden worlds under the sands of Egypt. Although we do know impressive underground necropolises, such as the Serapeum at Saqqara, with its giant sarcophagi for Apis bulls, or the vast catacombs of Kam el-Shugafah in Alexandria, the scale of these structures already discovered suggests the existence of a much larger and more complex system of underground passages, which can extend for many kilometers and connect various sacred sites, temples, and even cities. Some alternative researchers based on ancient myths and obscure texts suggest that these underground labyrinths could have served as shelters during global cataclysms, for example, the flood, repositories for forbidden or lost knowledge, unique technologies, genetic banks, or even places for secret rituals and initiations that should have been completely hidden from the eyes of the uninitiated and the outside world. Legends and some ancient sources hint at the existence of vast underground worlds inhabited either by the ancestors of the Egyptians or by mysterious creatures. These subterranean mysteries remain one of the most fascinating and least explored areas of ancient Egyptian archaeology, as their scale and complexity require enormous resources and the most advanced technologies to fully explore. And who knows what discoveries may be waiting for us under the surface of the Egyptian sands if these legends turn out to be true. Unearthed treasures and ultimate mysteries, the eternal call of the unknown. As we conclude our deep and detailed exploration of the inexplicable mysteries of ancient Egypt, we address the mysteries that may forever remain hidden beneath the sands of time, and the all-encompassing feeling that we have barely touched the true depth of this amazing civilization, whose secrets continue to elude our full understanding. One of the most exciting and constantly exciting mysteries is the location of undiscovered tombs of important pharaohs and other key historical figures. Despite the stunning discovery of Pharaoh Tutankhamun's virtually untouched treasury by Howard Carter in the Valley of the Kings, which revealed incredible riches and invaluable information about his era, the tombs of such significant rulers as the great Queen Cleopatra VII, the mysterious and powerful Nefertiti, whose body has not yet been identified, although her sarcophagus may be located in tomb KV35, or many of the powerful pharaohs of the early dynasties are still missing. These tombs, if ever discovered, may not only yield stunning new treasures comparable or even superior to those of Tutankhamun, but also, more importantly, reveal invaluable insights into the life, politics, religious beliefs, art, and even technology of the time. Each such find provides a unique, undistorted view of long-gone eras, potentially changing our understanding of the history of entire dynasties. The search for these tombs continues with the latest technology, including satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radars, and muon imaging. But Egypt's great rulers seem to have hidden their final resting places with remarkable skill, evading detection for thousands of years. This keeps the intrigue alive, as each new discovery could turn out to be the very thing that will change Egyptology forever. Also intriguing are the predictions and prophecies believed to have taken place in ancient Egypt, demonstrating their unique perception of time and destiny. The most famous example is the prophecy of Nefertiti, an ancient Egyptian text dating from the period of the Thortenian dynasty, approximately 1991-1786 BC, but dating back to the reign of Snefru, circa 2613-2589 BC, a pharaoh of the 4th dynasty. This text describes future events, including times of chaos and turmoil, social upheaval, foreign invasions, and finally the coming of the Savior King, Amini, who will restore order and prosperity to Egypt. Although most academic scholars tend to interpret such texts as pseudo-prophecies, that is, works written retroactively during or after the events described in order to legitimize the ruling dynasty or a particular ruler, the very fact of their existence, their detail, and their ability to anticipate future events raises questions. Could the Egyptian priests and sages really have had the ability to foresee the future using complex astrological calculations, intuitive insights, trance techniques, or any lost methods of communicating with the information field of the universe? Or do these texts reflect their deep understanding of the cyclical nature of history, human nature, and patterns in the development of societies, which allowed them to predict certain social and political shifts with surprising accuracy? This adds another layer of mysticism to the role of the priesthood and its supposed supernatural or parapsychological abilities, as well as their unique view of the linearity and cyclicity of time. Finally, Egypt's last unsolved mystery is not a specific archaeological find, a specific written source, or a sealed chamber, but rather an all-encompassing, pervasive sense that we have barely touched the surface of its deepest secrets. This is the realization that, despite thousands of years of research and discovery, ancient Egypt continues to be an inexhaustible source of questions, where every answer found, every riddle solved, gives rise to new, even more complex and profound questions. It is a constant feeling that under the endless sands and the depths of monumental ruins, in not fully deciphered symbols and veiled myths, there is something much more grandiose, complex, and highly developed than we can imagine based on our current knowledge and historical paradigms. Perhaps the true purpose of the pyramids goes beyond just tombs, being multifunctional structures with an energy, astronomical, or even interdimensional dimension. The value. Perhaps the lost knowledge of the Egyptian priests was much more extensive than we assume, including not only physics and engineering, but also the secrets of consciousness, energy, and the universe. Perhaps the myths of gods descending from the heavens and teaching humans are actually veiled memories of actual contacts with highly advanced extraterrestrial civilizations, or of the lost golden age of humanity when technology and spiritual development were at an incomparably higher level. This eternal mystery, which constantly challenges our rational thinking, forcing us to reconsider established truths and open our minds to new possibilities, is perhaps the most fascinating and intriguing part of ancient Egypt, beckoning us to continue our research and search for answers in the endless maze of its mysteries. Unexplained artifacts and unfathomable knowledge, forgotten technologies, and lost secrets. Our study of ancient Egypt leads us to a number of artifacts and concepts that are so unusual that they challenge existing academic paradigms, suggesting that we view this civilization as the possessor of lost technologies or knowledge beyond our current understanding. One of these profound mysteries is the energy of Osiris and its possible applications. In ancient Egyptian mythology, Osiris was the god of rebirth, fertility, and the afterlife. But in esoteric traditions and alternative theories, his name is often associated with some invisible, fundamental energy that may have been used by the Egyptians. There is an assumption that Osiris could symbolize not just a deity, but some kind of cosmic or earthly energy that the priests were able to control. Proponents of this theory point to certain architectural features of temples, pyramids, and underground complexes that may have been designed as resonators, capacitors, or even generators of this energy. For example, the location of some structures in relation to water sources or geodesic lines of the earth, as well as the use of certain minerals and materials, may not be random. The hypothesis suggests that the energy of Osiris could be used for healing, changing consciousness, influencing plant growth, and possibly for more complex technological purposes, such as levitation or stone processing. Although there is no direct archaeological evidence for this, and academic science rejects such speculation, the idea that the ancient Egyptians could understand and use the invisible forces of nature at a level beyond our current knowledge is deeply intriguing and constantly inspires new research. Perhaps their mythology was not just a collection of stories, but an encrypted guide to interacting with reality. The next puzzle is knowledge about the sphericity of the Earth and other planets. Although it is believed that a flat Earth was a common view in ancient times, some indirect evidence from ancient Egypt, as well as from other ancient cultures, may indicate that advanced priests and astronomers had much more accurate ideas about the shape of our planet and the structure of the solar system. Egyptian texts contain complex astronomical observations and mathematical calculations that required precision that was difficult to achieve without understanding the sphericity of the Earth and the laws of celestial mechanics. For example, their ability to accurately determine the periods of eclipses and planetary movements, as well as some images where celestial bodies are represented as spheres, can serve as indirect evidence. Although there are no direct maps depicting the round Earth, as in Eratosthenes, who lived much later, or models of the heliocentric system, some researchers believe that this knowledge was esoteric, passed on in a narrow circle of initiates, and was not available to the general public. If this is true, then the Egyptians were millennia ahead of their time, with knowledge that might have been lost in periods of decline or war, only to be rediscovered in ancient Greece and the Renaissance. This raises the question of the possible existence of a common source of knowledge for different ancient civilizations. Finally, we are faced with the question of ancient libraries and repositories of knowledge that may still be waiting to be discovered. Everyone knows the legendary Library of Alexandria, but this is a relatively late creation. In the context of ancient Egypt, we are talking about much older and possibly hidden vaults. Legends and some esoteric sources, for example, Edgar Cayce's mention of the Hall of Testimony under the Sphinx, suggest the existence of secret libraries containing not only scrolls and papyri, but also possibly ancient devices, drawings, maps, and other artifacts describing the true history of mankind, lost technologies, astronomical data, and esoteric knowledge. These libraries may have been created not only by the Egyptians, but also by older, possibly antediluvian civilizations that used Egypt as a place to preserve their knowledge in case of future cataclysms. Although there is no archaeological evidence for these secret libraries yet, the very fact of their possible existence continues to inspire researchers and adventurers alike. If such a library were found, it could revolutionize our understanding of the ancient world, reveal answers to many mysteries, and perhaps even give humanity access to lost knowledge that could change our future. This is one of the greatest hopes of alternative archaeology. Artifacts made of unknown materials and design elements, evidence of a different era. As we continue to delve into the mysteries of ancient Egypt, we find that not only do the scale and precision of construction raise questions, but the materials and design elements of some artifacts and structures themselves seem anachronistic, hinting at knowledge and technology that should not have existed in that era. One of these intriguing mysteries are artifacts made of inexplicably hard materials. Although the ancient Egyptians were masters of stone processing, the use of certain extremely hard rocks, such as diorite, quartzite, and basalt, to create not only large statues and sarcophagi, but also small, complex vessels and figurines is puzzling. Diorite, for example, is one of the hardest stones. Its Mohs hardness is close to 7, which is comparable to quartz. Processing such material with copper or bronze tools, which are much lower in hardness, is almost impossible, and achieving high accuracy in polishing requires a huge amount of time and effort that seems disproportionate to the result. However, the Egyptians used diorite to create elegant vases with thin walls, perfect internal cavities, and intricate designs. How did they do it? The traditional explanation includes the use of abrasives, sand or quartz chips, and hand tools, but this does not explain the achieved level of accuracy and smoothness, as well as labor costs. Some alternative theories suggest that the Egyptians had lost knowledge about the chemical softening of stone or used unknown types of high-strength alloys for tools that were harder than diamond. It is also possible that they used some methods using ultrasonic vibrations or resonance, which allowed them to cut the stone at the molecular level. The discovery of mysterious drill marks in some hard rocks that look as if they were created by high-speed tools further fuels this speculation. These artifacts serve as tacit proof that the Egyptians possessed material processing techniques that far exceeded what we attribute to them. The next aspect that raises questions is the use of metal alloys that were not typical for that era. It is generally accepted that ancient Egypt was a Copper and Bronze Age civilization, with a gradual transition to iron in later periods. However, there are rare finds and references that may indicate that the Egyptians possessed more complex metallurgical knowledge. For example, some artifacts found in Tutankhamun's tomb include an iron dagger, which studies have shown contains nickel and cobalt, which is characteristic of meteoritic iron. This suggests that the Egyptians used metal that fell from the sky. But more intriguing are the rare references to other, unusual metals or alloys in ancient texts that do not correspond to the known metals of that time. For example, did they have any knowledge of platinum, which some speculate was used in small quantities in South America? Some alternative researchers even suggest that the Egyptians may have had knowledge of orichalci, a mythical metal mentioned by Plato in connection with Atlantis, which may have had unusual properties. While this sounds like science fiction, the very existence of meteorite iron artifacts and potential hints of other unusual alloys make one wonder about the breadth of their metallurgical knowledge. They may have experimented with different combinations of metals, creating alloys with increased strength or other unique properties, the recipes of which were lost. This opens the door to hypotheses that their tools used to work hard stone may have been made of metals or alloys that are still unknown to us. Finally, elements of futuristic design and symbolism in Egyptian art and architecture are also a source of speculation. In addition to the Abydos hieroglyphs already mentioned, which resemble helicopters, there are other images and forms that seem to go beyond a purely religious or aesthetic purpose. For example, some stylized images of the heads of animals or gods, especially those that have convex or streamlined shapes that are not found in nature, but are characteristic of modern cars or aircraft, or the use of precise geometric shapes, such as perfect circles, which are difficult to obtain without compasses or other precise tools. Some researchers see this not just as an artistic stylization, but as veiled blueprints or memories of technologies that the Egyptians saw or used. They suggest that certain symbols that we interpret as mythological might actually be schematic representations of devices, energy, or processes. For example, obelisks, in addition to their religious significance, could serve as antennas or elements of an energy system. This interpretation suggests that the Egyptians may have consciously or unconsciously incorporated elements of knowledge gained from more advanced civilizations or from a deeper antiquity into their works of art. This allows us to look at Egyptian art not only as an aesthetic expression, but also as a potential repository of encrypted information waiting to be decoded. Ancient space lore and anomalous phenomena, star charts and the influence of the heavens. In addition to Earth's mysteries, ancient Egypt left us a legacy that points to deep and sometimes inexplicable knowledge about space, astronomy, and the influence of celestial bodies on life on Earth. This raises questions about the origin of this knowledge and how far it extended our understanding of the universe. One of the central mysteries is the alignment of the pyramids by stars and astronomical events. The Great Pyramid of Cheops, as well as the other two pyramids of Giza, show an amazing accuracy of alignment in the cardinal directions, with a deviation of only a few arc minutes from the true north, and in certain stars. For example, the southern air ducts, or shafts, from the King's Chamber and Queen's Chamber of the Great Pyramid are believed to have been directed to certain stars. The King's Shaft to the star Alnitak in the Orion Belt, identified with Osiris, and the Queen's Shaft to Sirius, identified with Isis. This accuracy of alignment, especially given the precession of the Earth's axis, a slow change in the orientation of the Earth's rotation axis, which shifts the apparent position of stars over thousands of years, suggests that the Egyptians not only had accurate astronomical knowledge, but could also calculate precession for huge periods of time. The traditional explanation boils down to centuries-old observations of the sky and the use of simple tools such as plumb lines and star sights. However, to achieve such accuracy requires not just observations, but complex mathematics and a deep understanding of celestial mechanics, which raises doubts about their availability for the Egyptians of that time. Alternative theories suggest that the Egyptians inherited this knowledge from an older, highly developed civilization that had telescopes or other advanced astronomical instruments. Some researchers, such as Robert Bouval, have proposed the Orion correlation hypothesis, according to which the location of the three pyramids of Giza exactly corresponds to the position of the three stars of the Orion Belt, as they looked in about 10,500 BC. If this is the case, then this indicates not only the deepest antiquity of knowledge, but also that the Egyptians, or their predecessors, knew about precession and deliberately encrypted this information in the location of monuments. This mystery points to a much deeper connection between Egyptian civilization and the cosmos than we can imagine. The next puzzle concerns ancient models of the solar system and the concept of planets. Although official Egyptology claims that the Egyptians did not have a heliocentric model of the universe, and their cosmology was focused on Earth, some fragments of texts, images, and interpretations of symbols may hint at more advanced knowledge. For example, the reference to Ra's journeys through the heavens could be an allegory for the movement of the sun and planets. Astronomical sealings in the tombs of pharaohs, for example in the tomb of Senmut, and in temples, Dendersky zodiac signs, contain images of planets, their constellations, and even hints of their movement. Although these images are usually interpreted as mythological or astrological, their remarkable accuracy in displaying the relative positions of certain celestial bodies could only be achieved with a deep understanding of their orbits. Some alternative researchers believe that the Egyptians may have known about more planets than was known in their time, or even about the structure of other star systems. Perhaps this knowledge was obtained from external sources or through advanced observational techniques that we don't understand. If the Egyptians really had an idea of the spherical Earth, its movement around the sun, or other planets, this radically changes our understanding of the level of their scientific thought and demonstrates that they were millennia ahead of their time. This mystery forces us to rethink how primitive their scientific worldview was, and opens up the possibility of the existence of lost astronomical data that could reveal their true understanding of the cosmos. Finally, we are faced with the mystery of the Nut sky and other cosmological concepts. The sky goddess Nut, often depicted as a woman bent over the earth, represents the firmament through which Ra, the sun, makes its day and night journey. This image, although mythological, may contain hidden astronomical knowledge. For example, its star-studded body could be a map of constellations, and its cyclical absorption and birth of the sun could symbolize the movement of celestial bodies, or even the concept of black holes in the cycles of the universe. Some researchers, moving away from the literal interpretation, suggest that the Egyptians had a complex cosmology that included not only visible stars, but also deeper aspects of the universe, such as the multidimensionality of space, parallel worlds, or even the nature of the universe itself. Could their myths have been metaphors for describing complex physical or cosmological concepts that we are only now beginning to understand? This raises the question that their mythology may have been not just a collection of fairy tales, but a veiled way of transmitting scientific knowledge accessible only to initiates. Perhaps studying their cosmological texts from a new interdisciplinary perspective can reveal the amazing scientific truths hidden behind the symbolic language of gods and myths. Mysterious devices and unusual texts, forgotten knowledge and hidden instructions. In addition to magnificent structures and astronomical mysteries, ancient Egypt left us with several artifacts and text fragments that, if interpreted correctly, may indicate the existence of complex devices and technologies, as well as deep but now lost knowledge that exceeds the level of development attributed to them. One of the most intriguing mysteries is the mention of magic mirrors or lighting devices. In ancient Egyptian texts and myths, as well as in later Hermetic treatises, there are frequent references to mirrors that not only reflected the image, but could also be used for divination, communication with spirits, or to obtain special information. Although most of the archaeological finds of mirrors are polished metal discs made of bronze or copper that were used for cosmetic purposes, some researchers suggest that there may have been other, more complex mirrors or lenses with unusual properties. For example, could they have used special optical devices to magnify images or to concentrate sunlight in order to create high temperatures, perhaps to process gold or other metals? There is also speculation about lighting devices other than the dendera lamp that may have been used for lighting or other purposes. Some theories suggest that the Egyptians may have possessed the secrets of cold light or bioluminescence, or used natural phenomena to create light sources. Although it sounds like science fiction, the very fact that there is no soot in some hard-to-reach areas and the presence of images that can be interpreted as technological makes you think. Perhaps these magic mirrors and lighting devices were not only ritual objects, but also devices that use the principles of optics, electromagnetism, or other physical laws that were known only to a narrow circle of initiates. Another fascinating mystery is unusual maps or schemes that do not correspond to Earth's realities. While we have detailed maps of tombs and temples, some researchers claim that Egyptian papyri or temple walls may have been encrypted with maps depicting not Earth's territories, but, for example, star systems, other planets, or even diagrams of some devices. Although most academic scholars consider such interpretations speculative and attribute them to the rich symbolism and mythological representations of the Egyptians, proponents of alternative theories point out certain anomalies that are difficult to explain solely by symbolism. For example, some maps of the starry sky demonstrate knowledge about celestial bodies that could not be obtained without advanced telescopes, as already mentioned. Perhaps hidden among the many hieroglyphs and drawings are diagrams, or drawings, that, if properly deciphered, may turn out to be technical instructions for creating devices or understanding complex concepts. If this is the case, it indicates that the Egyptians may have possessed not only advanced astronomical knowledge, but also possibly technical knowledge that is beyond our current understanding. Perhaps these maps were the legacy of an older global civilization, or even indicated contacts with beings from other worlds who passed on their knowledge to the Egyptians. Finally, we are faced with the question of ancient computers or computing devices. Although the term computer in the modern sense is certainly not applicable to ancient Egypt, There is a hypothesis that the Egyptians may have used very complex mechanical or even mathematical devices to perform astronomical calculations, predict events, or control complex processes. For example, their ability to accurately calculate the movement of stars and planets, predict Nile floods, and accurately align their monuments requires mathematical knowledge and computing power that seems unattainable without any auxiliary tools. Although there is no direct archaeological evidence for such devices yet, some indirect evidence, such as complex calendars, astronomical tables, and incredibly accurate engineering calculations, suggests the existence of some kind of analog computing machines or methods. They may have used movable discs, gears, or other mechanical devices similar to the famous Antikythera, a similar mechanism, although a much later Greek device. Or perhaps their computers were not physical devices, but complex systems of knowledge transmitted orally through priestly schools or even special meditation techniques that allow them to calculate information at the level of consciousness. This mystery suggests that the Egyptians may have possessed ways of processing information that were much more advanced than we usually think, and that their technology may have been not only mechanical, but also based on more subtle spiritual or energetic principles. Lost realms and connections to other worlds' myths, geography, and etheric bridges. Ancient Egypt, in addition to its grandiose earthly achievements, is shrouded in myths and legends that point to the existence of lost realms, deep connections with other dimensions, and even contacts with beings that do not belong to our world. These stories, often dismissed as fiction, continue to inspire researchers to search for hidden truths. One of the most fascinating legends is the connection to Atlantis or other antediluvian civilizations. Although Atlantis is considered a myth described by Plato, many esoteric traditions and alternative historians claim that ancient Egypt is the direct heir, or at least the keeper of knowledge of a vanished, highly developed civilization that was destroyed by a global cataclysm, possibly the Great Flood. Proponents of this theory point to several key points. The sudden appearance of a complex Egyptian civilization out of nowhere with no visible stages of development, especially in the early dynastic period, inexplicable engineering and astronomical knowledge that seems too advanced for its time, and the presence of megalithic structures that, in their opinion, could have been created by technologies of the antediluvian era. It is assumed that the survivors of the Atlantean disaster, or representatives of another ancient civilization, brought their knowledge and technology to Egypt, becoming gods or teachers for the local population. Some even point to architectural similarities between Egyptian megaliths and structures in other parts of the world, for example in South America, which may indicate a single source of knowledge. Although there is no direct archaeological evidence for Atlantis in Egypt, this hypothesis offers a possible explanation for anomalies in Egyptian culture and technology, filling in gaps in our understanding of its origins. It also echoes the Egyptian tradition of the first time, Zep Tepi, when the gods ruled the earth and transmitted knowledge to mankind. The next mystery is the ancient references to giants or Nephilim. In various ancient texts, including biblical, Sumerian, and Egyptian, there are references to giants, powerful creatures that lived on earth in ancient times. In Egyptian mythology, there are figures that could be interpreted as giants, or beings with superhuman strength and stature. For example, some deities are depicted as colossal, and although this may be a symbolic representation of their greatness, some proponents of alternative theories see this as a literal indication of the existence of tall creatures. Some also associate these Re'ur's giants with the idea of Nephilim, fallen beings or descendants of the sons of God, and daughters of men as described in Genesis. These giants may have possessed not only great power, but also advanced knowledge or technology that they could pass on to humans, or even participated in the construction of some megalithic structures. Although archaeological finds of giant human skeletons in Egypt are rare and often disputed, the idea that the Egyptians interacted with beings other than ordinary humans remains a powerful element of ancient mythology and continues to inspire alternative research into the origins of human civilization and its extraordinary achievements. Finally, we come across the concept of stargates or interdimensional portals. In Egyptian cosmology and mythology, there is a deep connection with the heavenly bodies in the afterlife. For example, pyramids are often seen as stairways to heaven or pathways to the stars for the pharaoh's soul. Some researchers, based on certain images and texts, suggest that the Egyptians may have believed or even known about the existence of some stargate or interdimensional gateways. Portals. Points on Earth or in space through which one could travel to other dimensions or worlds. Although it sounds like science fiction, the idea of such a connection is present in the mythologies of many ancient cultures. It is possible that certain sacred sites or structures were built on portals or energy nodes that facilitated transcendental experiences or contacts with non-terrestrial entities. For example, mysterious anomalies in the Great Pyramid or its exact alignment with certain stars could be part of a system designed to activate such gates or to create conditions for a special kind of communication. Of course, this is the most speculative of all mysteries, but it reflects a deep human desire to understand the connection with the cosmos and the possibility of the existence of realities beyond our normal perception. Hidden prophecies and secrets of time. Future records and cycles of being. Ancient Egypt seems to have had not only a deep understanding of the past and present, but also the ability to see into the future. This riddle of hidden prophecies and their connection to the cycles of time is one of the most intriguing, hinting at knowledge that goes beyond ordinary human perception. One of these mysteries is the prophecies associated with the end times or global cataclysms. In addition to the already mentioned Nefertiti's prophecy, which describes periods of chaos and rebirth, in Egyptian mythology and some esoteric treatises, there are hints of larger-scale cycles of time and future global events. For example, the concept of the first time, Zep Tepi, the golden age when the gods ruled the earth, is often accompanied by the idea of its end and the possibility of a new first time. Some researchers see these myths as not just legends, but encrypted warnings or predictions about cyclical disasters, such as global floods, ice ages, or changes in the Earth's axis. Could the Egyptian priests, with their deep astronomical knowledge and understanding of precession, have predicted major geological or climatic changes? Or perhaps this knowledge was obtained from more ancient civilizations that survived such cataclysms and encoded their warnings in myths and monumental structures? If so, then the Egyptian temples and pyramids may have been not only tombs or places of worship, but also giant time capsules designed to preserve knowledge and warnings for future generations. This hypothesis suggests that the Egyptians had not only the ability to foresee, but also a deep understanding of cosmic cycles and their impact on the Earth. The next mystery concerns secret calendars and the cyclical nature of time. In addition to the usual civil and lunar calendars, the Egyptians may have used more complex esoteric calendars that reflected not only astronomical cycles, but also deeper cosmic or spiritual cycles. For example, their ability to track Sirius and its heliacal sunrise, which heralded the Nile flood, indicates a deep understanding of astronomy. But what if they also track much longer cycles, such as Plato's Great Year, about 2,520 years, the precession period of the equinoxes? Some researchers believe that Egyptian astronomical maps, such as the Denderski, the zodiac, or even the location of the pyramids, are a kind of calendar that tracks these grand cycles. Perhaps these secret calendars contained information about the onset of certain energy, periods when the influence of stars on the Earth and humanity changes, or when it is possible to open certain portals. If the Egyptians really had such a deep understanding of the cyclical nature of time, this indicates their advanced mathematical and astronomical abilities, which far exceed the generally accepted ideas. It also raises the question that their history and mythology may have been not just linear narratives, but a reflection of a cyclical worldview, where the past, present, and future are interconnected and repeated on different scales. Finally, we are faced with the mystery of sounding prophecies and voices from the past. Some ancient traditions speak of the ability of certain objects or places to make predictions or transmit information from the past or future. In addition to the already discussed singing colossi of Memnon, which made sounds at dawn, there are legends about other objects or places that could speak or give signs. These can be statues, stones, or even certain acoustically special rooms in temples. Although modern science tends to attribute this to natural phenomena, priestly manipulation, or mass hallucination, some researchers believe that the Egyptians may have used more subtle methods to create such effects or even to receive information. Could they have had knowledge of how to record sounds or messages in stone using principles of resonance or unknown forms of energy? Or perhaps these were not physical sounds, but voices perceived in altered states of consciousness caused by rituals or meditative practices? This mystery is at the intersection of science, mysticism, and psychology, and suggests that the Egyptians had not only the ability to foresee, but also unique methods of transmitting and receiving information that we still do not understand. Perhaps they knew how to interact with the subtle planes of reality where time is not linear. Medical riddles and unexplained body knowledge, the ancient art of healing and the secrets of life. Ancient Egypt was not only a center of monumental construction and esoteric teachings, but also had a surprisingly advanced knowledge of medicine, anatomy, and physiology. Some aspects of their medical practices and understanding of the human body still remain a mystery, challenging the primitiveness of ancient civilizations. One of the most striking and still unexplained areas is the accuracy of surgical operations and knowledge of anatomy. Archaeological finds and analysis of mummies show that the ancient Egyptians performed complex surgical procedures that, it would seem, should have been inaccessible to that level of medical development. For example, mummies have been found with traces of successful craniotomy, surgical opening of the skull, amputations of limbs, as well as evidence of the treatment of bone fractures using splints and even dental procedures such as prosthetics and abscess removal. The Ebers Papyrus and the Edwin Smith Papyrus, both dated to about 1550 BC, contain detailed descriptions of thousands of diseases, their symptoms, diagnostic and treatment methods, including surgical instructions, indicating a systematic approach to medicine. The question is how Egyptian doctors could have achieved such precision without the adequate anesthetics, antiseptics, in sterile conditions that are the foundation of modern surgery. Although they used herbs for pain relief and knew about hygiene, their level of knowledge about infection prevention and pain control remains unclear. Some researchers suggest that the Egyptians may have used unknown herbal anesthetics with very powerful effects, or even possessed hypnosis and suggestion techniques that allow the patient to endure pain. Perhaps their knowledge of anatomy, acquired through mummification, was much deeper than is commonly believed. This mystery indicates that the Egyptians had not only outstanding practical experience, but also perhaps some secrets that we have not yet rediscovered in the field of ancient surgery. The next mystery is related to the technologies of mummification and preservation of bodies. Egyptian methods of embalming, developed over thousands of years, reached such perfection that they allowed preserving human bodies for thousands of years, resisting decomposition. The mummification process was complex and involved removing internal organs, with the exception of the heart, dehydrating the body with natron, a natural salt mixture, treated with incense and resins, and then carefully bandaged with linen strips. Modern research shows that embalmers had a surprisingly deep knowledge of chemistry and physiology, choosing certain salts, oils, resins, and even antibacterial substances that prevented decomposition and preserved tissues. However, despite extensive knowledge of the process, some aspects remain unclear. For example, how exactly did they achieve such perfect preservation of tissues and even external facial features? Were there any substances or methods used that we still can't identify? There is also speculation that mummification was not only intended to preserve the body for the afterlife, but may also have been associated with energy or spiritual practices aimed at preserving not only the physical shell, but also the connection between the soul and the body. This mystery indicates that the Egyptians had not only empirical knowledge, but also perhaps a deeper understanding of the processes of life and death, which was closely related to their metaphysical beliefs and went beyond mere preservation of the flesh. Finally, we are confronted with the mystery of the life force, Ka and Ba, in its energetic nature. As we have already discussed, the Egyptian concept of the soul was multi-component, and Ka, life force, life energy, double, and Bia, personality, soul, played a key role. The Egyptians believed that the Ka leaves the body after death, but continues to exist, needing food and sustenance through offerings so that the soul can continue its existence in the afterlife. This concept of the Ka as an invisible energy double, which can reside in statues or reliefs, hints at their understanding of certain bioenergetic fields. Could the Egyptians, through their rituals, meditative practices, or use of certain structures, consciously interact with these life forces or energy fields? Some alternative theories suggest that the pyramids and temples may have been not only places of worship, but also devices for concentrating or controlling this Ka energy used for healing, prolonging life, or even influencing consciousness. Although this is on the verge of metaphysics and speculation, the very existence of such a complex and detailed concept of the life force, which is not just metaphorical, but requires constant feeding and interaction, indicates a possible deep but lost knowledge about subtle energies and their impact on the human body and spirit. The Egyptians probably perceived the world not only through their physical senses, but also through the prism of invisible energies, which shaped their medical and spiritual practices. Archaeological anomalies and missing links. Unsolved gaps in history. Ancient Egypt, for all its exploration, is replete with archaeological anomalies and missing links in its history, which call into question the generally accepted chronologies and stages of development. These gaps and unexplained findings continue to be a source of controversy and alternative hypotheses. One of these fundamental mysteries is the sudden emergence of a complex civilization. Traditionally, it is believed that Egyptian civilization developed gradually from small communities along the Nile, moving from the Neolithic to a complex state. However, as some researchers point out, in the early dynastic period, from about 3100 BC, we see a surprisingly sudden emergence of a fully formed, highly developed culture with already well-established writing, hieroglyphs, complex architecture, starting with the mastabas and early pyramids, centralized governance, developed art, and a complex religious system. There is no clear, consistent archaeological evidence of primitive stages of development that should have preceded such a leap. Instead, it seems that civilization has already emerged ready-made, which raises questions about its origins. Where are the intermediates in this development? Why don't we see the thousands of years of experimentation and error that usually precede this level of complexity? This leads proponents of alternative theories to speculate that the Egyptian civilization may not have developed entirely on its own, but rather received momentum, knowledge, or even direct guidance from an older, possibly global or extraterrestrial civilization. This idea fits well with the Egyptian Zep-Tepi myths, first time, the golden age when the gods descended to earth and taught people everything necessary, including construction and science. Perhaps this was not a myth, but a veiled historical memory of the transfer of knowledge. The next mystery is the inexplicable breaks in chronology and the Dark Ages. In the history of ancient Egypt, there are periods known as transition periods, first, second, third, which are characterized by political instability, the collapse of centralized power, the decline of construction and art, and, importantly, a significant decrease in the number of archaeological records. These periods are essentially the Dark Ages of Egyptian history, about which much less is known than about periods of prosperity. Although they are traditionally attributed to internal conflicts, climate change, or invasions, some anomalies remain. For example, some researchers note that after such dark ages, Egypt was sometimes revived with new technologies or styles that did not seem to have developed directly from previous periods. This raises the question, what happened in these dark ages? Were these simply periods of decline, or were there some events or contacts that had a significant but undisclosed impact on Egyptian civilization? Perhaps these interruptions hide global catastrophes that led to the loss of knowledge and technology and then their partial recovery. The lack of detailed records and archaeological finds from these periods leaves a huge space for speculation about what exactly happened and what knowledge may have been lost, or conversely, acquired during these mysterious periods of time. Finally, we are faced with the development paradox, why many early buildings seem more sophisticated. This phenomenon, often ignored or explained as the result of chance or the unique genius of the first dynasties, is one of the most intriguing mysteries. For example, megalithic blocks and the precision of stone processing in the early dynastic period, for example in some parts of the Saqqara complex, or in Osirian if it is dated very early, or in the ancient kingdom period, the pyramids of Giza seem to be more sophisticated, massive, and technologically advanced than the buildings of later periods. Building pyramids, starting with the step pyramid of Djoser before the Great Pyramid of Cheops, it demonstrates an incredible engineering leap, after which it would seem there is a relative decline in the quality and scale, as well as in the accuracy of stone processing, although not in the number of structures. Why did subsequent pharaohs with access to the experience of their predecessors fail to replicate or surpass this early accuracy and scale? The traditional explanation may be related to resource depletion, changes in the political and economic situation, or a shift to other construction priorities, for example, more numerous but less massive temples. However, proponents of alternative theories see this as proof that the early Egyptians possessed technologies that were lost or forgotten in later centuries. Perhaps this knowledge came from an external source, or belonged to an older civilization that predated dynastic Egypt, and its traces were most pronounced in the early buildings, and then gradually faded away. This development paradox forces us to reconsider the linear model of civilizational progress and suggests that the most impressive achievements may not have come from the heyday itself, but rather from the mysterious origins of ancient Egypt. Unusual rituals and mysterious practices, forgotten paths to other dimensions. Ancient Egypt was filled with rituals and practices that went beyond just worshiping the gods. Some of them hint at a deep understanding of human consciousness, connections to invisible worlds, and even ways to influence reality that we now consider impossible. One of these mysteries is the rituals of opening the mouth and their metaphysical meaning. The ceremony of opening the mouth and eyes, or simply opening the mouth, was one of the most important and most sacred rituals in ancient Egypt. It was held over mummies, statues of gods, and even images on the walls of tombs. The purpose of the ritual was to revive the object, to enable it to breathe, see, eat, and speak. That is, to reconnect it with the life force of Ka and the soul of Ba, so that the deceased or deity could interact with the world of the living and the afterlife. To do this, the priests used special ritual tools, for example, shishup or psalter, and cast spells touching various parts of the mummy or statue. Although this can be interpreted as a symbolic act, some researchers suggest that the ritual had a deeper, metaphysical meaning. Could the priests have had knowledge of subtle energy fields and ways to activate certain centers in the body or object to connect with other dimensions? Perhaps this ritual was not just symbolic, but a real practice to change the energy state of an object or consciousness, allowing the soul of the deceased to interact with the material world or go to the afterlife. This puzzle points to the Egyptians' understanding of not only human physiology, but also the energetic anatomy of humans, as well as their ability to manipulate subtle energies to achieve transcendental goals. The next mystery is related to the use of psychoactive substances in rituals. Although the Egyptians were not widely known for using psychedelics like some other ancient cultures, such as the shamans of the Amazon, indirect archaeological and textual evidence hints at the possible use of certain plants or fungi to achieve altered states of consciousness for religious or medical purposes. For example, in some tombs, plant remains were found that could have psychoactive properties. There are suggestions that certain ritual drinks used by priests may have contained such ingredients to help them communicate with the gods, predict the future, or gain deep insights. The purpose of such practices could be not just intoxication, but a conscious expansion of consciousness in order to gain access to information from the collective unconscious or from invisible worlds. When combined with meditation, singing, dancing, and the special acoustic conditions of temples, such substances could contribute to deep spiritual experiences and visions, which were then interpreted as messages from the gods. If this is the case, then the Egyptians had not only knowledge of the pharmaceutical properties of plants, but also an understanding of the psychology and physiology of consciousness, which allowed them to purposefully use such substances in their rituals to achieve specific goals, perhaps even to explore the world of the dead or other dimensions. Finally, we are faced with the concept of sound chambers and their impact on humans. Rooms with unusual acoustic properties have been found in some ancient Egyptian structures. For example, in the Great Pyramid, inside the King's Chamber, some researchers note a unique resonance and echo that can be caused by certain sounds or voices. The ceiling of this chamber consists of massive granite beams, which may contribute to the creation of special acoustic effects. There are theories that these rooms were not random, but were deliberately designed to create certain sound vibrations that could have an impact on the human body and consciousness. Could the Egyptians have used these sound chambers to perform healing rituals, meditate, or achieve special states of consciousness that promote contact with divine entities? It is possible that certain mantras, chants, or musical instruments were used to activate these resonances, which allowed creating a unique acoustic environment that promotes the transformation of consciousness or even the body state. If this is the case, then the Egyptians had a deep knowledge of acoustics and psychoacoustics, which allowed them to use sound not only for communication, but also as a powerful tool for achieving metaphysical or therapeutic goals. This opens the door to speculation that ancient temples were not only places of worship, but also complex multifunctional centers where knowledge of sound played a key role. Unexplained images and cosmological secrets. Universal knowledge encoded in art. The art of ancient Egypt, which seems so canonical and symbolic, can actually hide the deepest cosmological knowledge and inexplicable images that go beyond simple myth-making, hinting at an understanding of the universe that is inaccessible to modern interpretations. One of the most controversial but intriguing mysteries is the cosmic maps that do not depict Earth's constellations. In addition to the known images of celestial bodies and constellations that correspond to our understanding, like Dendersky, the Dendarian zodiac, some researchers, especially from alternative archaeology, claim that Egyptian tombs or temples may contain encrypted maps depicting not terrestrial star clusters, but possibly other galaxies, nebulae, or even maps of other star systems. Systems that are not visible to the naked eye and were not known to ancient civilizations. Such interpretations are often based on unusual stylization or placement of celestial objects that do not coincide with the usual star maps, but may resemble astronomical images obtained by modern telescopes. Could the Egyptians have obtained this knowledge from external sources, such as extraterrestrial civilizations, or through technologies that allowed them to see beyond the visible spectrum? Although academic science considers this speculation, attributing unusual images to artistic license or symbolism, the idea that Egyptian art may have been a repository of unearthly or lost astronomical knowledge remains deeply intriguing and inspires the search for new interpretations of ancient symbols. The next puzzle is images of strange creatures or aliens. Although the Egyptian pantheon includes many gods with animal heads or hybrid forms that symbolize certain qualities, some depictions go beyond the usual canon and seem unusually similar to modern representations of extraterrestrial beings. These may include figures with disproportionately large elongated skulls, although some of them may be associated with dynastic features or artistic stylization, as in the Amarna period, huge almond-shaped eyes, unnaturally thin or, conversely, massive bodies, or strange, inhuman facial features. Proponents of the paleo-contact theory, they see these images as direct evidence that the ancient Egyptians had contact with extraterrestrial beings who were perceived by them as gods or teachers. These creatures could have passed on their knowledge of astronomy, engineering, medicine, and other sciences to the Egyptians. Although these theories have no direct archaeological evidence and are disputed by most scholars, they offer an explanation for those images that are difficult to fit into the traditional framework of Egyptian art and mythology. Perhaps these images are not just fantasy or stylization, but veiled memories of real meetings that left an indelible mark on the cultural memory of Egypt. Finally, we come across the symbolism of the Eye of Horus and its energetic meaning. The Eye of Horus, Wadjet, is one of the most recognizable and powerful symbols of ancient Egypt, representing a stylized human eye. It symbolizes protection, healing, rebirth, royalty, and fullness and wholeness. Each part of the Eye of Horus in Egyptian mathematics was associated with fractions: 212, 1014, 118, 116, 132, 164, which indicates its connection with mathematical knowledge. However, its significance may have extended much further. Some esoteric interpretations and alternative theories suggest that the Eye of Horus was not just a symbol, but a schematic image that carries knowledge about the energy structure of a person, about the work of the brain, or even about the principles of perception and communication with higher dimensions. It can be a kind of energy antenna or portal for consciousness. Perhaps the Egyptian priests used this symbol in rituals to enhance mental abilities, to heal, or to protect against negative influences. Some researchers associate it with the pineal gland in the brain, which in esoteric traditions is considered the third eye or gate of the soul. This riddle hints that the Egyptians not only had a deep understanding of human anatomy, but also knew about subtle energies and how to use them to achieve transcendent states, which gives the Eye of Horus symbol a much deeper and multidimensional meaning than ordinary protection. Secrets of water and hydraulics, lost methods and underground springs. Ancient Egypt is a civilization of the Nile, and water played a central role in its life. However, some of the mysteries surrounding water management and hydraulics go beyond simple irrigation farming, hinting at more advanced and possibly lost technologies, as well as a deep understanding of underground water systems. One of these mysteries is the magic wells and water sources in the desert. In addition to the well-known dependence on Nile floods, some ancient Egyptian texts and archaeological finds indicate the existence of wells or water sources in places where their occurrence seems inexplicable, especially in remote parts of the desert. These magic wells could provide water even in dry periods, which gave them a sacred meaning. The question is how the Egyptians found these sources and possibly managed them. Some researchers suggest that the Egyptians had a deep knowledge of geology and hydrogeology that allowed them to find hidden underground aquifers and artesian wells. Or perhaps they used some ancient technology to drill deep wells that were superior to primitive methods. There is also speculation that some of the wells may have been more than just water sources, but part of a more complex system linked to underground currents or even to the Earth's energy nodes, which allowed them to summon water. This mystery indicates that the Egyptians had a unique and possibly lost knowledge of hydrology that allowed them to survive and thrive even in the harshest desert conditions, using resources unavailable to others. The next mystery is related to the use of hydraulics and pumps. Although there is no direct evidence for the existence of complex pumping systems in ancient Egypt, their ability to manage colossal volumes of water, for example, for spills, irrigation systems, or filling ritual pools, suggests a deep knowledge of hydraulics. There are theories that the Egyptians may have used more than just simple shadufs, lever wells, or water lifting wheels, but also more complex, possibly even automated hydraulic systems for moving water over long distances or for lifting it to heights. For example, some researchers believe that complex systems of channels and locks could have been hidden in temple complexes or under pyramids, which made it possible to control the water level for ritual purposes or to facilitate construction. Or perhaps they knew about the principles of communicating vessels and other hydraulic laws, which allowed them to create efficient water distribution systems without using external energy sources. This puzzle suggests that the Egyptians had not only empirical knowledge, but also a theoretical understanding of hydrodynamics, which allowed them to build complex water structures and manage water resources with remarkable efficiency for that era. Finally, we are faced with the mystery of waterways inside pyramids and temples. In some structures, in addition to the usual corridors and chambers, hidden water channels, reservoirs, or even water elevator systems have been discovered or are suspected, which have no obvious explanation within the framework of traditional archaeology. For example, in some pyramids, especially in the Saqqara area, there are underground shafts that go deep underground, and sometimes traces of water are found at their base. Some alternative researchers suggest that these waterways may have been part of a complex system associated with the energy of the pyramids, or served for ritual ablutions that required large amounts of water in unusual places. Perhaps the water was used to create certain acoustic effects, or to reflect light, or even to work some mechanisms. There are also theories that water could have been used to cool the interior of the pyramids, or to create a special microclimate. This puzzle indicates that the Egyptians may have integrated water systems into their structures for much more complex purposes than just water supply, and that these goals may have been related to their deep understanding of the physics, energy, and ritual significance of water. Mysterious sculptures and inexplicable images, secret messages in stone. Ancient Egyptian sculpture, for all its canonicity, sometimes contains elements that go beyond the usual, hinting at hidden meanings, unusual technologies, or even messages encoded in stone for thousands of years. One such mystery is statues with inhuman proportions or features. Although Egyptian art is known for its strict canonicity and the use of certain proportions to depict people and gods, for example in squares, some statues, especially from the early periods, or those depicting certain pharaohs, as in the case of Akhenaten and his family, show unusual, even deformed features. For example, the famous statues of Akhenaten from Karnak have elongated faces, elongated skulls, wide hips and thin limbs, which is very different from classical Egyptian images. Although this is often explained by artistic stylization of the Amarna period, or an attempt to portray certain physiological features, for example, Marfan syndrome, some researchers put forward bolder hypotheses. Could these statues represent real people or creatures with unusual physical features that do not correspond to the modern human appearance? Some proponents of the paleo-contact theory see this as an indication of mixing people with some unearthly entities or genetic mutations caused by unknown factors. Others suggest that it may have been an attempt to portray people with a high level of spiritual development whose physical forms could change. This mystery raises the question of how literal the ancient Egyptian images were, and whether they could serve not just as symbols, but also as accurate portraits of creatures that today seem non-human to us. The next mystery is the technology of creating and reviving in statues. The ancient Egyptians attached great importance to statues, considering them not just works of art, but also receptacles for the soul of the Ka of the deceased or for the deity. The opening ritual, the mouth above the statue, was designed to animate it, allowing it to breathe, see, eat, and speak. The question is, what exactly the Egyptians meant by revival? Was this a purely symbolic act, or did they have the knowledge to transmit some kind of life force or energy to the statues? Some researchers suggest that the Egyptians may have used their knowledge of resonance, vibrations, or electromagnetic fields to charge the statues with energy. It is possible that certain materials, shapes, and locations of the statues in the temple complexes were not chosen by chance to enhance their energy properties. There is also speculation that ancient priests may have used some form of telepathic communication or suggestion to animate the statues in the minds of believers. This riddle indicates that the Egyptians perceived matter and spirit inextricably, and their art was not just decorative, but had a deep metaphysical and possibly energetic purpose, allowing them to control invisible forces. Finally, we are faced with the mystery of the sounding or singing stones in the pyramids. In addition to the colossi of Memnon, which are known to produce sounds, there are theories that certain stones or rooms inside the pyramids, especially in the Great Pyramid, have unique acoustic properties that may have been used intentionally. For example, in the chamber of the king of the Great Pyramid, a granite sarcophagus, according to some evidence, has an amazing resonance, producing musical tones when tapped. Some researchers suggest that the pyramids may have been designed as giant acoustic resonators capable of generating or amplifying certain sound frequencies. These frequencies could be used for various purposes: to change the consciousness of priests or initiates, to heal, to facilitate meditation, or even to influence materials, for example, to levitate or work stone, as already mentioned. Perhaps the Egyptians had a deep knowledge of the effects of sound and vibration on matter and energy, and used it in their most monumental buildings. This mystery suggests that the architecture of Egypt was not only visually impressive, but also acoustically active, creating invisible fields that could affect humans and the environment. Unexplained artifacts made of gold and precious metals, secrets of alchemy and processing secrets. Ancient Egypt was known for its wealth and skill in processing gold and precious metals. However, some artifacts found in tombs and temples indicate knowledge and technology that goes beyond ordinary jewelry making, hinting at deep alchemical secrets and processing techniques that remain unsolved. One such mystery is the inexplicable purity of gold and alloys. The Egyptians had huge reserves of gold and used it in colossal quantities to create jewelry, religious objects, sarcophagi, and even the lining of temples. However, many of their gold artifacts show an amazing purity of gold, which is achieved only at very high melting points and complex purification processes. The question is how they could have achieved such high purity without the use of modern metallurgical technologies that allow the removal of impurities. The traditional explanation involves melting in furnaces using coals and primitive bellows, but this does not explain achieving this degree of purification. Some alternative theories suggest that the Egyptians may have used certain chemical methods that we don't know about, or even possess the secrets of alchemy that allowed them to transmute metals or refine them to an incredible state. Perhaps they knew about substances that could serve as fluxes to remove impurities, or they used some magic formulas that were actually encrypted chemical processes. This mystery indicates that the Egyptians had a deep but lost knowledge of metallurgy and chemistry that allowed them to work with gold at a level that we are only now beginning to comprehend. The next puzzle involves the use of unknown, magical, or energetic properties of gold. In addition to its value as a material, gold had a deep sacred and metaphysical meaning in ancient Egyptian culture. It was associated with the gods, especially Ra, the sun god, whose flesh was thought to be made of gold, with eternity, immortality, and divine energy. Gold artifacts were often used in rituals and funerary rites to protect, purify, and facilitate the transition to the afterlife. The question is, was it just symbolism, or did the Egyptians believe that gold had real invisible properties that we don't understand today? Some alternative theories suggest that gold may have been used to store or transmit energy, much like a conductor. Perhaps it was used in some devices that amplified energy fields or affected human consciousness. Using monoatomic gold, or ormus, a substance that is believed to have supernatural properties and can influence consciousness and even physical processes, is one of these speculative hypotheses. If this is the case, then the Egyptians used gold not only as a precious metal, but also as a functional element in their magical and energy practices, indicating a much deeper understanding of its properties than we assume. Finally, we are faced with the mystery of electrum and its application. Electrum is a natural alloy of gold and silver, which was widely used by the Egyptians to create jewelry, vessels, and religious objects. Its color could vary from light yellow to almost white, depending on the silver content. However, in addition to its aesthetic value, some researchers suggest that electrum may have had special properties that the Egyptians used in their technology. For example, electrum has better electrical conductivity than pure gold, which may be important for some hypothetical electrical devices. Also, depending on the composition, it may be harder than pure gold, which made it easier to process. Perhaps the Egyptians knew about the specific properties of electrum and purposefully used it for certain purposes that required special physical or energy characteristics, and not just for decorative ones. This mystery hints that the Egyptians had not only a mastery of jewelry, but also a deeper understanding of material science and the properties of various alloys, which allowed them to use them for much more complex and possibly technological purposes than we can imagine today. Ancient technology and hidden knowledge, unfathomable methods of controlling nature. Ancient Egypt, in addition to its obvious achievements, leaves us with questions about the possible ownership of technologies that allowed them to interact with nature and even control it in ways that seem fantastic for that era. These puzzles hint at a deep understanding of the laws of physics and energy. One of the boldest but most intriguing hypotheses is weather weapons and climate control. While this sounds like something out of science fiction, some alternative researchers suggest that the ancient Egyptians, or the civilizations that preceded them and passed on knowledge to them, may have possessed technology to influence weather events. Of course, these were not rockets or cloud-siders in the modern sense. We are talking about the possibility of using natural phenomena, such as electromagnetic fields, acoustic resonances, or even secret knowledge about geothermal activity to cause rain, prevent droughts, or conversely, enhance certain natural processes. Egyptian mythology contains numerous references to gods controlling the weather, thunder, and lightning. Could these myths be allegorical descriptions of real, though lost, technologies or methods? It is possible that certain rituals performed in temples, or even the location of some monumental structures, were part of a system for interacting with atmospheric phenomena. While there is no direct archaeological evidence of a weather weapon, the idea that the Egyptians could have understood and manipulated the subtle energies of nature to influence climate is deeply intriguing and raises questions about the limits of their scientific understanding. The next mystery is the technology of teleportation or instantaneous movement. This hypothesis is one of the most radical, but it periodically arises in the context of unexplained movements of huge blocks of stone, as well as in connection with some mythological plots. If traditional methods, ramps, levers, labor, do not fully explain the construction of pyramids, could the Egyptians have had some methods that allowed them to reduce the weight of objects or instantly move them? In some esoteric traditions and legends, it is said that the ancient sages had the ability to levitate or teleport, which allowed them to overcome huge distances or move heavy objects using the power of thought or special devices. Although this is on the verge of fiction, the very need to explain the movement of multi-ton stones without obvious technologies opens the door to such speculation. Perhaps it was not a literal teleportation, but the use of unknown principles of physics, such as anti-gravity, sound levitation, or manipulation of energy fields, which created the illusion of instantaneous movement. This puzzle highlights that our current understanding of physical laws may be incomplete, and ancient civilizations may have possessed knowledge that is beyond the scope of today's science. Finally, we are faced with the conundrum of sound effects on materials. A number of ancient Egyptian structures and artifacts contain traces of stone processing, which is difficult to explain by primitive methods. Perfectly smooth surfaces, the incredible accuracy of cuts in hard rocks, as well as the absence of visible tool marks suggest the use of something else. The sound impact theory suggests that the Egyptians may have used high-frequency sound waves or resonance to soften or even break the stone, allowing them to process it with surprising ease and precision. This idea resonates with modern technologies of ultrasonic processing of materials, which allows cutting and forming very hard substances. If the Egyptians had such knowledge, then their tools could not be physical objects in our understanding, but some devices that generate certain sound frequencies. Some researchers point to the unusual acoustic properties of some pyramids and temples, suggesting that they may have been designed as giant resonators for this purpose. This mystery indicates that the ancient Egyptians may have had a deep but lost knowledge of physics, acoustics, and vibrations that allowed them to perform stonework that would have seemed impossible without advanced technology. Perhaps their engineering miracle was based not only on brute force, but also on a subtle understanding of the invisible forces of nature. Riddles of consciousness and spiritual practices, out-of-body travel in altered states. Ancient Egypt was not only a kingdom of pharaohs and pyramids, but also a civilization deeply immersed in the study of consciousness, spiritual practices, and the possibility of traveling beyond the physical body. These aspects of their culture hint at knowledge about the human mind that we are just beginning to explore. One of the most intriguing mysteries is the ancient practices of astral projection, or out-of-body. In Egyptian cosmology and the study of the soul, the concept of Ba, the part of the soul that could fly freely, leave the body and move between worlds, is central. Ba is often depicted as a bird with a human head, flying freely out of the tomb or traveling through the afterlife. This is not just a metaphor. Many esoteric traditions and alternative researchers believe that Egyptian priests and initiates actually possessed methods and techniques for consciously leaving the physical body and traveling to non-physical dimensions. That is, for astral projection. These practices may have included deep meditation, breath control, the use of certain sounds or mantras, and possibly the use of psychoactive plants for ritual purposes. The purpose of such journeys could be to gain information, communicate with entities from other dimensions, such as gods or ancestral spirits, or explore the afterlife, as described in the Book of the Dead. If this is the case, then the Egyptians had a much deeper and more practical knowledge of the nature of consciousness than is commonly believed, and could use it to gain information or achieve transcendental experiences, which is beyond the scope of ordinary religion. The next puzzle involves the use of dreams and visions for predictions. In ancient Egypt, dreams and visions were perceived not just as a product of the subconscious mind, but as a channel of communication with the divine world, omens of the future, or a way to obtain intimate knowledge. Pharaohs and priests often turned to dream interpreters, and some temples, such as the Temple of Serapis at Saqqara, were known as dream incubation sites, where people slept in sacred places in the hope of receiving divine dreams and insights. The question is how systematic their understanding of dreams was. Could they have used certain methods, such as special diets, herbal infusions, meditation, or special rituals, to purposefully evoke prophetic dreams or visions? Perhaps their priests had deep knowledge of how the human brain works and how to influence its activity to get information from the subconscious or from higher levels of consciousness. This riddle hints that the Egyptians not only believed in the prophetic power of dreams, but also had practical methods for using it, indicating their advanced understanding of psychology and its relationship to the spiritual world. Finally, we are confronted with the mystery of collective consciousness and its impact. Ancient Egyptian society was highly collectible, where the individual was subordinated to the community, the pharaoh, and the gods. Rituals, ceremonies, and the construction of monumental structures often involved the participation of thousands of people whose shared efforts, beliefs, and intentions could create powerful collective fields. Some esoteric theories suggest that the Egyptians may have consciously used the power of collective consciousness or collective energy to achieve certain goals. For example, could they channel the common faith and intention of vast masses of people to charge monuments with energy, to influence natural phenomena, or to create a powerful energy field in temples? This echoes the idea that mass rituals or pyramid building might have been not just physical labor, but a kind of psychic engineering, where collective energy was channeled to specific purposes. This mystery indicates that the Egyptians may have understood the principles of group dynamics and collective consciousness at a much deeper level than we do today, and may have used this power to influence reality, making their civilization even more unique and mysterious. Astrological secrets and celestial influence. Stars as harbingers of fate and carriers of knowledge. Ancient Egypt was deeply connected to the sky, and its astrological knowledge, extending far beyond mere stargazing, may indicate an understanding of cosmic cycles and their impact on human destiny. These aspects of their culture are a source of constant mystery. One of the most intriguing mysteries is the ancient horoscopes and predictions of fate from the stars. Although Egyptian astrology was not as developed and systematic as Babylonian or Greek, it certainly existed and played an important role in their worldview. The Egyptians associated the position of the stars and planets with the destinies of the pharaohs, important events, and even everyday life. For example, some papyri contain happy and unlucky days that were probably based on astrological calculations. The question is, how deep was their knowledge in this area? Could the Egyptian priest astrologers have made individual horoscopes or made very accurate predictions using methods that we don't understand? They may have had more complex models of planetary motion and influence than is commonly believed. This mystery indicates that the Egyptians perceived humans as part of a larger cosmic system, where the position of stars and planets could influence fate, character, and even health. This raises the question of the nature of their astrological knowledge. Was it based on thousands of years of empirical observation, or was it inherited from more advanced civilizations? The next mystery concerns the use of heavenly signs in politics and religion. In ancient Egypt, celestial phenomena such as eclipses, comets, or unusual planetary locations were perceived as divine signs that foreshadowed important events, both favorable and unfavorable. Priests and pharaohs kept a close eye on the sky, and these signs often influenced political decisions, military campaigns, and religious rituals. For example, some researchers suggest that the construction of certain temples or pyramids may have been started or completed in accordance with certain astrological or astronomical events. The pharaohs could base their legitimacy on divine signs revealed in heaven. The question is how literally they interpreted these signs. Was this just superstition, or did the Egyptians have the ability to foresee celestial phenomena with amazing accuracy and use them to manipulate society or justify their actions? This mystery points to a deep relationship between Egyptian religion, politics, and astronomy, where the heavens played a central role in governing society. Finally, we are faced with the mystery of star names and their meaning. Many Egyptian deities and pharaohs had names associated with stars or celestial bodies. For example, the goddess Sopdet, Sirius, was closely associated with the flooding of the Nile and fertility. Deacons, or groups of stars that were used to count down time at night, were also associated with certain deities and rituals. The question is, was this just a symbolic identification? Or did the Egyptians believe that certain stars and constellations had a real influence on the fate of a person or on the energy processes on Earth? Could the names of the pharaohs, given in honor of the stars, be not just a tribute, but a way to connect to certain cosmic energies or influences? Some alternative theories suggest that this reflects a deep understanding of the genetic or energetic heritage associated with star systems. This riddle indicates that the Egyptians perceived the heavens not just as the abode of the gods, but also as a source of energy, information, and influence that had a profound impact on their lives and destinies, which gives their astrology a much deeper and more practical meaning than just prediction. Undiscovered artifacts and unsolved secrets of vaults, forgotten treasures, and hidden knowledge. Ancient Egypt, with all its stunning discoveries, still holds many secrets about undiscovered artifacts and hidden vaults that can fundamentally change our understanding of this civilization, its technology, and history. These puzzles continue to inspire adventurers and scientists alike. One of the most tempting, but still unrealized dreams is the discovery of the original tomb of Imhotep. Imhotep is an almost mythical figure. He was the architect of the first pyramid, Djoser's step pyramid at Saqqara, a high priest, vizier, physician, and sage, deified after death and revered as the god of medicine and wisdom. He is considered one of the greatest geniuses in the history of mankind. Despite his enormous influence, his tomb, the final resting place, has not yet been found. If Imhotep's tomb were discovered, it could become one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time, perhaps surpassing even the treasures of Tutankhamun. It could contain not only rich burial materials, but also scrolls with his medical treatises, engineering drawings, philosophical reflections, and astronomical observations. These texts could reveal the true level of knowledge of ancient Egypt in various fields, and possibly provide answers to many questions about the origin of their technology and wisdom. The search for Imhotep's tomb is actively conducted in the Saqqara region, but so far it has been unsuccessful, which only increases its mystery and significance as one of the holy grails of Egyptology. The next mystery is related to secret repositories of ancient texts and maps, in addition to the Library of Alexandria. Although the Library of Alexandria was the greatest repository of ancient knowledge, it was created in the Hellenistic period, much later than the heyday of the ancient kingdom and the construction of the pyramids. The question arises, where was the knowledge of the early dynasties stored? Could there have been older, possibly hidden or underground libraries and archives that were destroyed, lost, or still not found? The legends about the Hall of Testimony, under the Sphinx mentioned by Edgar Cayce in some esoteric sources, suggest the existence of such a repository containing the history and knowledge of more ancient civilizations that preceded the Egyptian one. These vaults may have been protected from destruction, such as the Great Flood, or geological cataclysms, which explains their deep location. If such libraries exist, they could contain not only historical records, but also scientific treatises, maps of the starry sky, descriptions of technologies that we consider modern, and even knowledge about interstellar travel or alternative dimensions. The discovery of such a repository would change our understanding of not only ancient Egypt, but also the entire history of mankind. Finally, we are faced with the mystery of lost artifacts and technologies. For thousands of years, ancient Egypt has been the target of looters, conquerors, and explorers, and many artifacts have been lost or still not found. But it's not just about gold treasures. There are references in ancient texts to miraculous devices, magical items, or unusual tools that had incredible properties or were used to perform impossible tasks. These can be sundial that can measure time with incredible accuracy, magic amulets that have healing or protective properties, or even mechanical toys or automata that move by themselves using unknown principles. Could these references be descriptions of real but lost technologies that went beyond primitive mechanisms? They may have been devices that operate on principles that we are just beginning to understand, such as electromagnetism, acoustics, or even anti-gravity. If such artifacts were found, they could confirm the presence of lost technologies and radically change our understanding of the abilities of ancient civilizations, becoming a testament to their incredible but forgotten heritage. Animal mysteries and unusual symbols, hidden connections and biological secrets. The ancient Egyptians deeply revered the animal world, giving it a sacred meaning and symbolism. However, some aspects of their relationship to animals and animal images go beyond mere zealotry, hinting at deep biological knowledge, unknown connections, and even the possible existence of creatures that seem fantastic to us today. One of these profound mysteries is the cult of totem animals and their unusual properties. Many Egyptian gods were depicted with heads or in the form of animals. Horus, falcon; Anubis, jackal; Thoth, ibis or baboon; Sobek, crocodile; Sekhmet, lioness, and others. These animals were not just symbols, but also objects of worship, and their mummies, for example, millions of mummified ibises or cats, indicate the scale of the cult. The question is why these animals were chosen, and whether the Egyptians believed that they had special, possibly supernatural properties that we cannot explain today. Could the Egyptians have had knowledge of the biological or energetic characteristics of these animals that made them particularly susceptible to divine influences or capable of transmitting certain energies? For example, the sharp eyesight of a falcon, the night vision of a jackal, or the ability of a crocodile to survive both on land and in water could be not just metaphors, but indications of their special qualities. Some researchers speculate that the animal cult may have been linked to their observation of animals with unusual abilities or displaying behaviors that seem supernatural to them. This mystery points to the possibility that the Egyptians may have deep but lost knowledge about bioenergetics or hidden properties of the animal world, which we are just beginning to study today. The next puzzle involves images of unknown or extinct animals. On some ancient Egyptian reliefs and frescoes, there are images of animals that are difficult to identify with known species, or which it would seem have become extinct long ago. For example, in the tomb of Ptah-hotep in Saqqara, there are images of animals that some interpret as dinosaurs or other prehistoric creatures. Of course, most Egyptologists attribute this to stylization, artistic license, or identification errors. However, if these images really represent extinct or unknown animals, then the question arises, how could the Egyptians have seen them or known about them? This could mean that A, these animals lived much longer than is commonly believed, or B, the Egyptians, or their predecessors, had access to information or evidence about life that existed millions of years ago. It is possible that this knowledge was obtained from older civilizations that coexisted with these creatures, or through some paleontological finds that we have not been able to identify. This mystery challenges our understanding of the chronology of species and raises questions about the depth of ancient knowledge about the biological history of the Earth. Finally, we come across the symbolism Ankh and its connection with the life force. Ankh is an ancient Egyptian hieroglyph that is often interpreted as the key of life, a symbol of eternal life, immortality, and protection. It has the shape of a cross with a loop on top. Ankh is often depicted in the hands of gods and pharaohs, passing it on to people, which symbolizes the gift of life and vitality. However, in addition to the obvious symbolism, some alternative theories suggest that the Ankh could be not just a symbol, but a schematic representation of some device or principle associated with vital energy. For example, its shape could be similar to some kind of antenna or resonator that can interact with bioenergetic fields. There is speculation that Ankh may have been used to heal, prolong life, or charge water or other substances with energy. If this is the case, then the Egyptians may have had knowledge of subtle energies and how to use them to influence living organisms, which gives the Ankh a much deeper and more functional meaning than just a religious symbol. This suggests that they understood life not only as a physical phenomenon, but also as an energetic one. Unexplained phenomena and hidden forces, control of nature and forgotten interactions. Ancient Egypt, as we have seen, was deeply connected with nature and the cosmos. However, some riddles hint that the Egyptians may have possessed not just understanding, but also the ability to control or interact with natural forces in ways that remain incomprehensible to us. One of the most daring but exciting hypotheses is thermal control inside pyramids and temples. The inner chambers of the Great Pyramid, such as the King's Chamber and the Queen's Chamber, maintain a relatively stable temperature of about 20 degrees Celsius, regardless of external temperature fluctuations in the desert. Although this can be attributed to the massiveness of the stone structure and the thermos effect, some researchers suggest that such stability may not have been accidental, but the result of deliberate design or the use of unknown technologies to control the temperature. Could the Egyptians have used some sort of passive or active ventilation system that we didn't find? Or perhaps they knew about the principles of geothermal energy, or even how to manipulate heat flows to maintain a certain temperature inside these colossal structures? This may be due to their use as storage facilities, laboratories, or places for rituals where a stable temperature was required. This mystery indicates that the Egyptians had not only outstanding engineering skills, but also a deep understanding of thermodynamics and its application in architecture, which goes beyond primitive methods. The next mystery is related to the seismic stability of ancient structures. Many ancient Egyptian temples and pyramids built thousands of years ago are surprisingly well preserved, despite the fact that Egypt is located in a seismically active zone. Although major earthquakes are rare there, they still occur, but most of the megalithic structures survived. This suggests that the Egyptians may have been aware of building principles that provided seismic stability, similar to modern buildings that can withstand earthquakes. Could they have used certain methods of absorbing vibrations, such as flexible joints between blocks, or a special masonry technique that allowed structures to withstand ground vibrations? For example, some researchers suggest that the use of dovetail or other connections between blocks could be not only for strength, but also for flexibility. Or perhaps they had knowledge of geophysics and chose construction sites that were less susceptible to seismic activity. This mystery indicates that the Egyptians had not only engineering skills, but also a deep understanding of the mechanics of materials and the dynamics of structures, which allowed them to build objects that are resistant to natural disasters. Finally, we are faced with the mystery of ancient machines for moving water or objects. In addition to the already mentioned hypotheses about complex hydraulic systems, there are hints that the Egyptians used some kind of machines that could facilitate the movement of huge blocks or water over long distances. These may not necessarily be internal combustion engines or electric machines in our understanding, but some mechanical devices that use principles that are unknown to us. For example, did they have complex systems of locks and channels that allowed barges with heavy blocks to be lifted to higher levels using only the force of water? Or perhaps they used some sort of cranes or hoists based on counterweights that were much more sophisticated than is commonly believed. Some researchers have also speculated about using compressed air or water as pneumatic or hydraulic lifts. This puzzle forces us to rethink the possibilities of ancient mechanisms and suggests that the Egyptians may have owned machines that were much more complex than primitive levers and rollers, and that allowed them to perform work that seems impossible today without modern technology. The deepest secrets and unfathomable questions. Where does the path of research lead? As we conclude our comprehensive study, we address some of the most profound and fundamental questions that ancient Egypt continues to pose to humanity. These mysteries go beyond specific artifacts or structures, touching on the very nature of knowledge, history, and our place in the universe. One of the most fundamental mysteries is the single source of ancient knowledge. As we study ancient Egypt and compare its achievements with other ancient civilizations, such as Sumerian, Indian, Mayan, Chinese, it becomes clear that many of them have surprisingly similar knowledge in astronomy, mathematics, architecture, cosmology, and even mythology. For example, the concept of the Great Year of Precession, precise astronomical calendars, knowledge of the golden ratio and pi, and megalithic structures are found in different geographically disparate cultures. This raises the question, is this the result of an independent, parallel development of human genius in different parts of the world? Or was there a single source of knowledge that was passed on to different civilizations in ancient times? This source could be a lost global civilization, for example Atlantis, that existed before the cataclysm, or contact with extraterrestrial civilizations that sowed knowledge on Earth. This mystery is one of the greatest in archaeology and history, and its solution could completely change our understanding of the origin of human civilization and its development. The next and perhaps most profound mystery is the nature of the gods and their true role. In ancient Egyptian mythology, the gods play a central role. They create the world, control natural forces, set laws, and interact with people. However, as we have repeatedly mentioned, many alternative researchers, and sometimes even the ancient texts themselves, hint that these gods could be not only mythological entities, but also real beings who came to Earth from other worlds or possessed incredible unearthly technologies. Were the Egyptian gods Osiris, Isis, Horus, Thoth, Ra, highly developed beings who possessed knowledge and abilities that seemed divine to people? Could they have been representatives of ancient, lost civilizations, or even extraterrestrial races that interacted with the Egyptians, passing on knowledge and technology to them? This hypothesis, known as the paleo-contact theory, offers a radical reinterpretation of mythology as a veiled story. If this is the case, then temples dedicated to the gods could not only be places of worship, but also points of communication, or even copies of technologies that were transmitted by these gods. This mystery is the key to understanding not only ancient Egypt, but also the role of the divine in the entire history of mankind. Finally, we come to the final, all-encompassing question: what else is hidden under the sands of Egypt? Despite centuries of excavations and research, only a small part of the territory of ancient Egypt has been fully explored. Huge areas remain untouched, and new technologies such as satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radars, and muon tomography are constantly detecting previously unknown structures underground. It can be not only the Hall of Testimonies under the Sphinx or the undiscovered tomb of Imhotep, but also entire cities, huge underground complexes, unknown artifact repositories, and perhaps even traces of technologies that seem fantastic to us today. Egypt continues to keep its secrets, and each new discovery only deepens our understanding of its complexity, but also increases the list of questions. This constant sense of unsolved mystery hidden beneath the surface is perhaps the most powerful mystery of ancient Egypt. It beckons researchers, scientists, and truth seekers, promising that the greatest discoveries are yet to come. And perhaps these last, deepest secrets of Egypt will be the key to understanding not only its own history, but the entire history of mankind, its potential and place in the universe. Egypt is a mirror of the unknown, an eternal call of mystery. We took a deep and detailed dive into 30 of the most inexplicable mysteries of ancient Egypt, a civilization that continues to capture the imagination, challenge modern science, and remind us of the limitless possibilities of the past and how much remains to be discovered. Throughout these chapters, we have explored stunning engineering achievements, such as the pyramids of Giza, whose construction methods remain the subject of heated debate, and the incredible precision of stone processing that seems to exceed the capabilities of the ancient technologies we know. We have encountered the mysteries of the obelisks and sarcophagi of the Serapeum, whose movement and manufacture seem unthinkable without the use of advanced tools. We delved into anomalies such as the Dendere light pole, which hints at the possible use of electricity, the Abydos hieroglyphs with their modern images, and the bird from Saqqara, which raises questions about aerodynamics. We were immersed in a world of lost knowledge and esoteric practices where secret societies of priests could master the secrets of cosmology, astronomy, medicine, and even mind control through mouth-opening rituals and the use of psychoactive substances. Riddles of curses of the pharaohs, supposed energy fields in the pyramids, talking oracle statues, and sounding stones only add to the mystical aura surrounding this ancient land, offering both rational and fantastic explanations. We also explored deep historical questions, legends about the more ancient origin of the pyramids, the possibility of hidden chambers and underground cities that could hold invaluable knowledge, as well as the fate of undiscovered tombs of great pharaohs and the significance of ancient prophecies. Riddles of biological knowledge, unusual technologies of thermal control and seismic stability of structures, as well as hints of ancient machines and methods of controlling nature. All this indicates a level of development that may have gone beyond the generally accepted ideas. We touched on the most profound cosmological mysteries, the alignment of the pyramids with the stars, theories about cosmic maps, images of strange creatures, the symbolism of the Eye of Horus as a source of energy knowledge, as well as assumptions about the Stargate and connections with Atlantis. Finally, we looked at the mysteries of consciousness, astral projection, prophetic dreams, and the power of collective consciousness, which point to the Egyptians' deep understanding of the human mind and its potential. Drevni Egypt is not just a collection of archaeological finds and dry historical facts. It is a living, ever-changing museum of unsolved puzzles, each of which invites us to wonder. Was this the result of thousands of years of continuous evolutionary development of human genius in isolation? Or did this civilization rely on lost knowledge gained from older, perhaps global civilizations, or even from sources that go beyond the Earth, like the human race? Is this what the paleo-contact theory suggests?